Tonight, instead of opening a history book, you are opening a forgotten door that has remained quietly closed for centuries. Beyond it lies no grand throne room, no battlefield echoing with famous names, and no palace crowded with celebrated rulers. Instead, you find narrow pathways worn smooth by countless ordinary feet workshops scented with wood smoke and warm clay, quiet temples glowing beneath soft torchlight and forgotten hands, performing tasks so familiar to their own time that few people ever thought to write about them. These are the hidden occupations that quietly allowed civilizations to wake each morning, prepare each meal, honor each season, and remember each ancestor. Before tonight's forgotten story quietly unfolds, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you enjoy relaxing journeys through history. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. As your footsteps slow, the modern world gently fades behind you. The air grows cooler, ancient voices become whispers carried on the evening breeze. Every doorway seems to hide another overlooked story, every worn tool another life patiently lived. History begins to feel less like a list of events and more like an old library, where every forgotten shelf still waits for someone curious enough to stop and look. Now settle in, get comfortable, and let history quietly unfold around you. Section 1. The first thing you notice is not the fire itself, but its smell. Long before you see the warm glow, the gentle scent of wood smoke drifts through the cool evening air. It carries traces of dry cedar, cracked pine, damp moss, and something sweeter that may be juniper slowly burning beneath heavier logs. The fragrance settles into clothing woven baskets, animal skins, and even hair, becoming part of everyday life so completely that few people would have thought to describe it. You follow the scent through a small settlement where daylight is quietly surrendering to dusk. Children gather the last armfuls of sticks before darkness arrives. Dogs circle lazily near cooking places. Older people finish repairing woven nets while speaking in calm voices. Clay pots release gentle clouds of steam carrying the comforting aroma of barley, herbs, onions, or perhaps lentils, depending upon where and when your journey has carried you. Nothing feels hurried. Instead, everything seems to move with the steady rhythm of people who understand that daylight always leaves at its own pace. Near the center of the settlement stands someone history almost never remembers. Their clothing is ordinary. Their hands are blackened by soot. Their face glows softly in the orange light. This person is neither ruler nor priest, yet everyone occasionally glances toward them. They are the keeper of the secret fire. Across many ancient societies, maintaining an important communal fire was not simply another household chore. Archaeological evidence from settlements stretching across Europe, the Near East Asia and later civilizations suggests that carefully maintained hearths often occupied central positions within homes, temples, or gathering places. Fire offered warmth, light, cooked food, safer drinking water, hardened tools, and protection from wild animals after sunset. But beyond practical needs, fire quietly gathered people together. You sit nearby and notice how no one allows the flames to burn too low. Fresh wood is placed with practiced movements rather than hurried ones. Dry branches are chosen first, thicker logs afterward. Ash is gently shifted aside with carved wooden tools, allowing hidden embers beneath to breathe once more. The work demands patience rather than strength. A single mistake could mean beginning again from nothing. Today, striking a spark may seem simple enough, but for much of human history, creating fire required skill-suitable materials, dry weather, and often considerable time. Friction methods demanded endurance. Flint and pyrite required careful angles. Even experienced hands sometimes failed repeatedly before the first tiny ember finally appeared. That difficulty helps explain why many communities preferred never allowing an important fire to die. Instead, someone quietly watched it, hour after hour, season after season. Perhaps you imagine this occupation becoming monotonous, yet as evening settles more deeply, you begin noticing how many decisions surround every glowing ember. Wind changes direction. Rain approaches. Children wander away. It's on too close. Fresh fuel must dry before joining the fire. Cooking requires different flames than pottery firing. Ceremonies ask for slower burning wood than ordinary meals. The keeper observes every change almost without speaking. The fire becomes something almost alive. Its voice changes constantly. Sometimes it crackles sharply as trapped moisture escapes fresh timber. Sometimes it sighs through glowing coals. Occasionally, bright sparks drift upward into the growing darkness, disappearing among the first stars as though carrying invisible messages beyond human sight. Many ancient cultures connected fire with spiritual meaning. In ancient Rome, the sacred flame of Vesta burned continuously within her temple, watched over by the Vestal Virgins, whose responsibility symbolized the protection of the city itself. Similar traditions appeared elsewhere where eternal flames represented continuity between generations, households' ancestors, or divine powers. Yet historians remain uncertain about exactly how widespread permanent communal fires truly were outside the best documented civilizations. Archaeological hearths survive remarkably well, but the daily routines surrounding them often vanish, leaving only charcoal layers, burned stones, and scattered ash for modern researchers to interpret. Much remains wonderfully uncertain. You lean closer and notice another quiet detail. The keeper rarely stares directly into the flames. Instead, their attention moves constantly toward the stacked wood, toward changing clouds, toward smoke rising straight upward or bending sideways, toward children carrying kindling, toward older women preparing evening meals, toward hunters returning across distant grasslands. The fire is only one part of a much larger conversation with the world. Its health reflects everything happening around it. Nearby, someone carefully splits logs using polished stone tools worn smooth by years of use. Each strike produces a dull wooden sound rather than the sharp ring of metal. Tiny curls of fragrant wood scatter onto packed earth where they will later become perfect tinder. You pick one up. It feels feather light between your fingers. Soft, dry, ready. The keeper smiles almost invisibly before placing it beneath larger branches with deliberate care. Small preparations like these often mattered more than dramatic gestures. Night deepens. The temperature quietly falls. People move closer together without discussing it. Fire changes architecture as much as it changes comfort. Houses throughout countless ancient settlements were arranged around central hearths. Smoke escaped through roof openings or drifted slowly between thatch, darkening wooden beams over generations. Walls absorbed warmth that lingered long after flames settled into glowing embers. Even silence feels warmer here. A child approaches carrying several unusually shaped sticks gathered from nearby woodland. Rather than immediately feeding them into the flames, the keeper examines each one. One is too damp. Another contains hidden rot. A third produces pleasant, fragrant smoke suitable for tonight's gathering. Knowledge passes without book. The child watches carefully. No lecture follows, only demonstration. Many ancient occupations survived exactly this way. Skills lived inside repeated actions rather than written instructions. Every evening offered another lesson, every season another opportunity for careful observation. By adulthood, knowledge had settled naturally into muscles and memory. Perhaps no one ever called this education, yet it certainly was. As stars slowly multiply overhead, the fire becomes less important for seeing and more important for belonging. People arrange themselves around its warmth almost instinctively. Stories begin. Some speak about nearby rivers, others remember grandparents. Someone quietly jokes about stubborn goats wandering into vegetable gardens. Gentle laughter rises, then fades. The keeper adds another log before anyone notices the need. That small unnoticed action allows every conversation to continue uninterrupted. It is surprisingly easy to overlook occupations whose greatest success is preventing problems before they appear. When the fire burns well, nobody praises it. When it fails, everyone notices. Perhaps that has always been true. You look upward once more. Smoke drifts through branches where sleeping birds occasionally shuffle their feathers. Crickets begin their steady evening chorus. Somewhere beyond the settlement, an owl calls softly across open fields, answered by another almost too distant to hear. The flames reflect in patient eyes. Tomorrow morning, before sunrise colours the eastern horizon, someone will already be awake. Ashes will be stirred, hidden embers uncovered. Fresh fuel carefully arranged. Another ordinary day will quietly begin because one forgotten worker never stopped paying attention to a handful of glowing coals. It is humble work, yet countless generations depended upon it, and as you slowly rise to continue your journey, carrying the comforting scent of wood smoke with you, another overlooked occupation quietly waits beyond the next winding path. Tonight, instead of opening a history book, you are opening a forgotten door that has remained quietly closed for centuries. Beyond it lies no grand throne room, no battlefield echoing with famous names, and no palace crowded with celebrated rulers. Instead, you find narrow pathways worn smooth by countless ordinary feet, workshops scented with wood smoke and warm clay, quiet temples glowing beneath soft torchlight, and forgotten hands performing tasks so familiar to their own time that few people ever thought to write about them. These are the hidden occupations that quietly allowed civilizations to wake each morning, prepare each meal, honor each season, and remember each ancestor. Before tonight's forgotten story quietly unfolds, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you enjoy relaxing journeys through history. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. As your footsteps slow, the modern world gently fades behind you. The air grows cooler, ancient voices become whispers carried on the evening breeze. Every doorway seems to hide another overlooked story, every worn tool another life patiently lived. History begins to feel less like a list of events and more like an old library, where every forgotten shelf still waits for someone curious enough to stop and look. Now settle in, get comfortable, and let history quietly unfold around you. Section 1. The first thing you notice is not the fire itself, but its smell. Long before you see the warm glow, the gentle scent of wood smoke drifts through the cool evening air. It carries traces of dry cedar, cracked pine, damp moss, and something sweeter that may be juniper slowly burning beneath heavier logs. The fragrance settles into clothing woven baskets, animal skins, and even hair, becoming part of everyday life so completely that few people would have thought to describe it. You follow the scent through a small settlement where daylight is quietly surrendering to dusk. Children gather the last armfuls of sticks before darkness arrives. Dogs circle lazily near cooking places. Older people finish repairing woven nets while speaking in calm voices. Clay pots release gentle clouds of steam carrying the comforting aroma of barley, herbs, onions, or perhaps lentils, depending upon where and when your journey has carried you. Nothing feels hurried. Instead, everything seems to move with the steady rhythm of people who understand that daylight always leaves at its own pace. Near the center of the settlement stands someone history almost never remembers. Their clothing is ordinary. Their hands are blackened by soot. Their face glows softly in the orange light. This person is neither ruler nor priest, yet everyone occasionally glances toward them. They are the keeper of the secret fire. Across many ancient societies, maintaining an important communal fire was not simply another household chore. Archaeological evidence from settlements stretching across Europe, the Near East Asia and later civilizations suggests that carefully maintained hearths often occupied central positions within homes, temples or gathering places. Fire offered warmth, light, cooked food, safer drinking water, hardened tools and protection from wild animals after sunset. But beyond practical needs, fire quietly gathered people together. You sit nearby and notice how no one allows the flames to burn too low. Fresh wood is placed with practiced movements rather than hurried ones. Dry branches are chosen first, thicker logs afterward. Ash is gently shifted aside with carved wooden tools, allowing hidden embers beneath to breathe once more. The work demands patience rather than strength. A single mistake could mean beginning again from nothing. Today, striking a spark may seem simple enough, but for much of human history, creating fire required skill-suitable materials, dry weather, and often considerable time. Friction methods demanded endurance. Flint and pyrite required careful angles. Even experienced hands sometimes failed repeatedly before the first tiny ember finally appeared. That difficulty helps explain why many communities preferred never allowing an important fire to die. Instead, someone quietly watched it, hour after hour, season after season. Perhaps you imagine this occupation becoming monotonous. Yet as evening settles more deeply, you begin noticing how many decisions surround every glowing ember. Wind changes direction. Rain approaches. Children wander away. On too close. Fresh fuel must dry before joining the fire. Cooking requires different flames than pottery firing. Ceremonies ask for slower burning wood than ordinary meals. The keeper observes every change almost without speaking. The fire becomes something almost alive. Its voice changes constantly. Sometimes it crackles sharply as trapped moisture escapes fresh timber. Sometimes it sighs through glowing coals. Occasionally, bright sparks drift upward into the growing darkness, disappearing among the first stars as though carrying invisible messages beyond human sight. Many ancient cultures connected fire with spiritual meaning. In ancient Rome, the sacred flame of Vesta burned continuously within her temple, watched over by the Vestal Virgins, whose responsibility symbolized the protection of the city itself. Similar traditions appeared elsewhere, where eternal flames represented continuity between generations, households, ancestors, or divine powers. Yet historians remain uncertain about exactly how widespread permanent communal fires truly were outside the best documented civilizations. Archaeological hearths survive remarkably well, but the daily routines surrounding them often vanish, leaving only charcoal layers, burned stones, and scattered ash for modern researchers to interpret. Much remains wonderfully uncertain. You lean closer and notice another quiet detail. The keeper rarely stares directly into the flames. Instead, their attention moves constantly, toward the stacked wood, toward changing clouds, toward smoke rising straight upward or bending sideways, toward children carrying kindling, toward older women preparing evening meals, toward hunters returning across distant grasslands. The fire is only one part of a much larger conversation with the world. Its health reflects everything happening around it. Nearby, someone carefully splits logs using polished stone tools worn smooth by years of use. Each strike produces a dull wooden sound rather than the sharp ring of metal. Tiny curls of fragrant wood scatter onto packed earth where they will later become perfect tinder. You pick one up. It feels feather light between your fingers. Soft, dry, ready. The keeper smiles almost invisibly before placing it beneath larger branches with deliberate care. Small preparations like these often mattered more than dramatic gestures. Night deepens. The temperature quietly falls. People move closer together without discussing it. Fire changes architecture as much as it changes comfort. Houses throughout countless ancient settlements were arranged around central hearths. Smoke escaped through roof openings or drifted slowly between thatch, darkening wooden beams over generations. Walls absorbed warmth that lingered long after flames settled into glowing embers. Even silence feels warmer here. A child approaches carrying several unusually shaped sticks gathered from nearby woodland. Rather than immediately feeding them into the flames, the keeper examines each one. One is too damp. Another contains hidden rot. A third produces pleasant, fragrant smoke suitable for tonight's gathering. Knowledge passes without book. The child watches carefully. No lecture follows, only demonstration. Many ancient occupations survived exactly this way. Skills lived inside repeated actions rather than written instructions. Every evening offered another lesson, every season another opportunity for careful observation. By adulthood, knowledge had settled naturally into muscles and memory. Perhaps no one ever called this education, yet it certainly was. As stars slowly multiply overhead, the fire becomes less important for seeing and more important for belonging. People arrange themselves around its warmth almost instinctively. Stories begin. Some speak about nearby rivers, others remember grandparents. Someone quietly jokes about stubborn goats wandering into vegetable gardens. Gentle laughter rises, then fades. The keeper adds another log before anyone notices the need. That small unnoticed action allows every conversation to continue uninterrupted. It is surprisingly easy to overlook occupations whose greatest success is preventing problems before they appear. When the fire burns well, nobody praises it. When it fails, everyone notices. Perhaps that has always been true. You look upward once more. Smoke drifts through branches where sleeping birds occasionally shuffle their feathers. Crickets begin their steady evening chorus. Somewhere beyond the settlement, an owl calls softly across open fields, answered by another almost too distant to hear. The flames reflect in patient eyes. Tomorrow morning, before sunrise colours the eastern horizon, someone will already be awake. Ashes will be stirred. Hidden embers uncovered. Fresh fuel carefully arranged. Another ordinary day will quietly begin because one forgotten worker never stopped paying attention to a handful of glowing coals. It is humble work, yet countless generations depended upon it, and as you slowly rise to continue your journey, carrying the comforting scent of wood smoke with you, another overlooked occupation quietly waits beyond the next winding path. Section 2. The scent of wood smoke lingers gently in your clothing as you leave the quiet settlement behind. It follows you for a while, mingling with the fresh breath of morning, carried inland from a distant sea. The path beneath your feet slowly changes. Packed earth gives way to pale sand, then to smooth stones, rounded by generations of restless tides. The air becomes cooler, touched by salt and the faint sweetness of drying seaweed spread across sunlit rocks. Far ahead waves rise and settle with remarkable patience. Their rhythm has changed very little for thousands of years. As dawn stretches across the horizon, the coastline slowly awakens. Seabirds glide low over the water before circling back toward rugged cliffs. Tiny crabs disappear into narrow crevices as the tide withdraws. Pools left behind shimmer like polished glass, revealing miniature worlds of shells, anemones, and drifting strands of green algae. Most visitors would admire the peaceful view. Someone else sees a workplace. You notice several figures moving carefully among the rocks, carrying woven baskets no larger than a loaf of bread. They do not search for fish or collect driftwood. Their eyes remain fixed on tiny shellfish clinging stubbornly to wet stones, where each retreating wave exposes them for only a few moments. These quiet workers are searching for creatures no larger than your thumb. Their goal is astonishingly precious. Across much of the ancient Mediterranean, particularly among the Phoenicians, one of history's most valuable colours began with humble sea snails belonging to the murex family. Hidden within these modest mollusks rested a tiny gland capable of producing the famous purple dye, that eventually clothed emperors, queens, priests, and wealthy merchants. The shell itself appears almost ordinary. Nothing about it suggests extraordinary value. You kneel beside one of the collectors and watch their practiced movements. They loosen each snail with a slender bone tool, careful not to damage either shell or delicate hand. The basket slowly fills with dozens, then hundreds, each one clicking softly against the others like polished stones. The work demands remarkable patience. Many thousands of these creatures were required to produce only a small amount of dye. Historians estimate that enormous quantities of shellfish were processed to create enough purple colouring for even a single luxurious garment. Entire coastal workshops accumulated towering heaps of discarded shells, some of which archaeologists still uncover today. These pale mounds remain silent reminders of an industry whose fragrance was far less pleasant than its finished product. The shoreline smells wonderfully fresh. The workshops did not. You continue walking until you reach one of these ancient dyeing places. Before seeing it, you notice an unfamiliar scent drifting on the breeze. It is sharp, earthy, and difficult to describe. Salt water mingles with decaying organic matter, fermented liquids, damp stone, and warm sunlight. Even centuries ago, visitors almost certainly noticed it, yet the workers seem completely accustomed to the smell. Clay vessels stand in orderly rows beneath simple shelters built from timber and woven reeds. Some contain seawater, others hold carefully prepared mixtures awaiting the next stage of the process. Experienced hands move quietly between them, never rushing, because time itself becomes one of the essential ingredients. The colour cannot be hurried. At first, nothing appears purple at all. Freshly extracted fluid often looks pale, creamy, or even yellowish. Only through careful exposure to air and sunlight does a remarkable transformation begin. Gradually, the liquid deepens through shades of green and blue before finally settling into the rich purple that made this dye legendary. Even today, the chemistry feels almost magical. Ancient workers certainly observed the transformation long before they understood why it happened. You pause beside an older craftsperson who studies the changing colours with calm attention. Their eyes remain fixed upon the liquid rather than the sky. Small differences matter. Too much warmth alters the process. Too little light delays it. Fresh seawater behaves differently from yesterday's. Every batch teaches another quiet lesson. Knowledge grows slowly, like the tide. The unusual detail that historians continue to admire is how carefully these workers guarded their methods. Phoenician cities such as Tyre became closely associated with purple dye, so much so that later generations often called it Tyrian purple. The craft brought prestige and wealth, encouraging skilled families to preserve techniques through apprenticeship rather than written instruction. Exactly how much each workshop read remains uncertain. Archaeologists recover vat shells, tools, and stained soil, but spoken advice disappeared long ago. Perhaps one family preferred longer fermentation. Another may have harvested during particular seasons. Someone else may have noticed subtle differences among shellfish gathered from neighbouring coves. Those quiet decisions vanished with their makers. The sea remembers. You watch as another collector returns from the rocks carrying only a half-filled basket. No disappointment appears. Some mornings simply offer fewer shells. Nature determines the schedule. Unlike modern factories governed by clocks, these occupations followed tides, weather, seasons, moonlight, and migration. Work expanded when conditions allowed and paused when the shoreline demanded patience. The collectors understood they belonged to the coast rather than controlled it. Clouds drift overhead, briefly softening the sunlight. The workers continue without complaint. One person repairs a woven basket using strips of reed softened in seawater. Another sharpens a bone tool against a smooth sandstone worn by years of similar movements. Nearby children gather broken shells into neat piles, learning long before adulthood that every task contributes to the larger rhythm. No lesson is formally announced. Observation is enough. You notice how quiet the workplace remains despite steady activity. Conversations occur in low voices. Instructions are brief. Most communication happens through example. A younger collector watches an elder choose larger shellfish while ignoring smaller ones. No explanation follows immediately. Understanding arrives through repetition. That rhythm feels strangely comforting. As the afternoon unfolds, dyed cloth hangs from wooden frames where gentle breezes move it, almost imperceptibly. At first glance, the fabric appears dark blue. Then the angle of sunlight shifts, revealing deep violet hidden within its folds. Moments later, it seems almost crimson before returning once more to royal purple. The colour never quite sits still. Perhaps this subtle change contributed to its enduring fascination. Ancient writers often associated purple with authority, ceremony, and prestige. Yet standing here among damp rocks, weathered baskets, aching knees, and salt-stiffened clothing, you are reminded that extraordinary luxury often begins with remarkably ordinary labour. Someone had to climb slippery stones. Someone had to brave cold waves before sunrise. Someone patiently gathered creatures smaller than a child's hand. Without them, emperors would have worn different colours. A gentle wind rises from the open sea, carrying tiny droplets that cool your face. Gulls wheel overhead, their distant calls blending with the steady whisper of surf. The collectors gradually empty their baskets, rinse their hands in shallow pools, and prepare for another tide tomorrow. Nothing about their work seeks recognition. The finished cloth will travel far beyond this coastline, admired in marketplaces, temples, and royal courts. Few who touch it will ever imagine the quiet mornings, slippery rocks, patient gathering, and persistent smell of salt that made such beauty possible. History often remembers the robe. It forgets the shoreline. As evening begins to soften the light, once again you leave the coast with the sea breeze still lingering around you. The waves continue their endless conversation with the land, just as they did before the first collector bent to lift a tiny shell from the rocks. Ahead, another forgotten occupation patiently waits beyond the next quiet road where different scents, different tools, and different hands have equally remarkable stories to share. Section 3. The scent of salt slowly fades behind you as the coastline disappears into a gentle morning mist. With each quiet step inland, the air begins to change once again. Sea breeze gives way to warmer currents carrying unfamiliar fragrances. Wild herbs release their oils beneath the growing sun. Cypress trees offer a dry, resinous aroma. Somewhere nearby, flowering shrubs perfume the breeze so lightly that their sweetness seems to arrive and vanish with every breath. The road becomes smoother. Stone walls appear beside it. Soon you find yourself approaching a temple where the day has only just begun. The building rises with quiet dignity rather than overwhelming grandeur. Pale columns catch the first golden light, while broad steps still hold the coolness of the night. Birds nest beneath carved roof beams. Water trickles gently from a nearby fountain into a shallow basin, where worshippers pause to wash their hands before entering. Yet before anyone speaks a prayer, another ritual quietly unfolds. You notice it first through scent. Warm resin, freshly crushed herbs, dry cedar, hints of cinnamon, a whisper of myrrh. The fragrances mingle so naturally that it becomes impossible to separate one from another. They drift through open courtyards and shaded corridors, settling softly into linen robes, polished stone wooden doors, and woven baskets waiting beside the workshop. This is the domain of the temple perfume grinder. History often remembers the priests who offered incense or the rulers who commissioned grand ceremonies, but someone first had to create the delicate mixtures that filled sacred spaces with fragrance. Long before modern chemistry, skilled artisans patiently transformed bark flowers, seeds, tree resins, spices, oils, and precious gums into perfumes and incense believed worthy of both people and gods. You quietly step inside the workshop. The room feels surprisingly calm. Sunlight filters through narrow openings, high in the walls, creating soft beams that illuminate drifting particles of fragrant dust. Shelves hold clay jars sealed with wax. Bundles of dried lavender hang beside rosemary, mint, and sage. Small woven trays display petals carefully drying in the warm air, while polished stone mortars sit upon sturdy wooden tables worn smooth by countless years of use. Nothing here moves quickly. Every motion seems measured. One artisan gently pours pale yellow frankincense tears into a shallow bowl. Another separates brittle pieces of myrrh from tiny fragments of bark. A younger apprentice carefully removes dust from dried rose petals using nothing more than soft brushes woven from grass. No ingredient is treated casually. Each possesses its own character. You move closer to an older craftsperson seated before a heavy grinding stone. Their hands carry fine traces of powdered herbs that have stained the skin over many seasons. Without speaking, they place several ingredients into the stone bowl before lifting a rounded pestle polished by decades of patient use. The first sound is almost musical, a slow circular scrape, then another. The rhythm never changes. Stone against stone produces a gentle whisper that blends with birds singing outside the temple walls. Every few moments, the artisan pauses, feeling the texture between careful fingertips. Some mixtures require coarse grains, others must become as soft as fine dust. Experience guides every decision. No written recipe lies nearby. Ancient Egypt offers some of the earliest well-documented evidence for sophisticated perfume making. Temples employed specialists who prepared fragrant oils, ceremonial incense, and sacred blends using ingredients gathered from remarkable distances. Frankincense traveled from southern Arabia and the Horn of Africa. Myrrh arrived through equally impressive trade routes. Cinnamon may have journeyed even farther, passing through many hands before reaching temple storehouses. Every fragrance carried its own story. Some had crossed deserts, others had sailed seas. A single jar resting quietly on a wooden shelf represented months of travel undertaken by merchants, sailors, caravan guides, and animal handlers whom history also rarely remembers. The perfume grinder knew their value. Nothing was wasted. You noticed tiny scales carved from bronze resting beside the work table. Small weights allow precious ingredients to be measured with remarkable care. Although exact recipes often varied, balance mattered deeply. Too much resin overwhelmed delicate flowers. Too many herbs masked sweeter notes. The final fragrance needed harmony rather than dominance. That pursuit feels strangely familiar, like music without sound. Nearby, another worker warms oil inside a broad clay vessel standing over a small charcoal fire. The flame remains low and steady, carefully tended to avoid scorching the precious liquid. Into this warm oil, handfuls of crushed flowers slowly release their fragrance over many hours. The workshop smells alive. Every corner offers something different. Fresh mint cools the air. Sweet iris lingers gently. Honeyed blossoms soften the sharper notes of pine resin. The scent changes as you walk, almost like wandering through invisible gardens that bloom inside the building itself. Historians know that perfumes served purposes far beyond simple pleasure. Sacred ceremonies, burial rituals, daily hygiene, hospitality, medicine, and personal adornment all made use of carefully prepared fragrances. In many ancient societies, pleasant scents symbolized purity, prosperity, hospitality, or divine favor. Yet many uncertainties remain. Organic materials disappear far more easily than sown. The oils themselves have long since evaporated. Flowers turned to dust centuries ago. Modern researchers study residue inside ancient vessels, analyze microscopic chemical traces, and compare surviving texts, but many original recipes remain mysteries. Some fragrances have been partially reconstructed. Others are lost forever, surviving only as names written upon fragile papyrus or carved into weathered temple walls. Perhaps that uncertainty adds to their beauty. You watch the artisan add a final ingredient. It is only a pinch, almost invisible. Yet everyone nearby seems to recognize its importance. No announcement follows, only quiet satisfaction. The apprentice gently lifts the finished powder into a painted ceramic jar before sealing it with a linen cover, tied carefully using flax cord. The vessel joins many others awaiting tomorrow's ceremonies. Outside worshippers begin arriving one by one. Few notice the workshop. They simply breathe deeply as they enter the temple, accepting the comforting fragrance as though it naturally belongs there. They never witness the long hours spent gathering petals before sunrise, drying herbs beneath careful shade, grinding resin into powder, or patiently blending in ingredients whose proportions may have taken generations to perfect. The finest work often becomes invisible. Its success surrounds people so completely that they forget someone created it. A soft breeze carries the temple fragrance through the courtyard where olive trees cast shifting shadows across pale stone. Bees wander lazily among nearby blossoms. Somewhere beyond the walls, merchants begin opening their stalls while children laugh in distant streets. Life continues. The perfume grinder continues as well. Tomorrow another batch must be prepared. Another jar carefully filled. Another ceremony quietly scented. Another memory gently attached to fragrance. Even today, a familiar smell can transport you instantly to another place or another time. Ancient people understood this deeply, even if they described it differently. Fragrance lingered in memory long after voices had fallen silent. As the afternoon light grows warmer, you leave the temple carrying faint traces of frankincense and crushed flowers upon your clothing. Behind you, the slow circular sound of stone grinding against stone continues almost unnoticed, just as it has for generations. Ahead lies another forgotten doorway where different hands patiently create beauty that history almost overlooked. Section 4. The fragrance of crushed flowers lingers gently as you leave the temple behind. For a while it stays with you, carried in the folds of your clothing, until the afternoon breeze gradually replaces it with the scent of warm limestone, dry earth, and freshly cut reeds. The road narrows between cultivated fields where workers bend quietly over grain ready for harvest. Farther away, date palms sway with slow confidence, their leaves whispering softly whenever the wind finds them. The sun has begun its gentle descent. Its light turns warmer. Shadows grow longer. Ahead, another remarkable occupation waits where few travelers would expect to find it. The building before you appears almost silent. Its entrance is narrow, its walls thick, its interior noticeably cooler than the bright afternoon outside. The stone doorway seems designed to separate two different worlds. Behind you lies the busy rhythm of ordinary life. Before you stretches a place built for memory. You step inside. The temperature falls immediately. The air feels dry against your skin. Your footsteps become softer as they settle onto smooth limestone worn by generations of careful workers. Dust floats lazily through narrow shafts of sunlight entering from hidden openings above. Somewhere in the distance you hear the faint scrape of a brush against plaster. Not hurried, never hurried. This is the workplace of the silent tomb painter. History often remembers the rulers whose names filled these chambers, yet remarkably little attention is given to the artists who patiently covered empty walls with scenes intended to last forever. Their work was not simply decoration. Every image carried meaning, offering comfort, guidance, identity, and hope for a journey beyond earthly life. You follow the quiet sound. The corridor opens into a spacious chamber where several painters continue their work with extraordinary patience. One kneels beside a wall already alive with graceful birds rising above marsh reeds. Another carefully outlines lotus blossoms floating upon still water. A third mixes pigments inside shallow stone bowls while studying the changing light that enters from above. The room feels peaceful, almost suspended outside time. The colours surprise you. After thousands of years, they remain astonishingly vivid. Soft reds, deep blues, golden ochres, fresh greens, smooth white limestone provides a calm background upon which every figure seems to breathe gently in the afternoon light. You watch one painter prepare fresh pigment. Nearby rests a collection of simple materials gathered from the natural world. Red comes from iron-rich earth. Yellow emerges from ochre. Black is made from finely ground charcoal. White is created using crushed limestone or gypsum. Blue, one of the most treasured colors, sometimes comes from an extraordinary synthetic pigment that ancient Egyptian craftsmen learned to produce through remarkable experimentation. Their palette is modest. Their imagination is not. The painter dips a brush made from carefully trimmed reeds into a shallow bowl before drawing a single steady line across freshly prepared plaster. The movement appears effortless, but only because countless years of practice have hidden the difficulty beneath quiet confidence. Nothing is corrected. Every stroke matters. Ancient Egyptian tomb painters often worked according to carefully planned grids that helped maintain balanced proportions throughout large compositions. Archaeologists have discovered faint guidelines beneath completed paintings revealing how methodically these artists organized scenes long before the final colors appeared. The planning remains visible. If you know where to look, you move closer without disturbing the work. The brush itself fascinates you. It is neither elaborate nor expensive. Its fibers have simply been softened until they spread slightly, allowing both delicate lines and broader strokes. Several brushes rest nearby, each worn differently according to the task it performs. One creates outlines. Another fills broad surfaces. Another paints tiny details inside birds' feathers or woven baskets. Tools become companions over many years. The painter pauses, not because of fatigue, because observation always comes before action. They study the wall, quietly comparing each new figure with those already completed. The spacing must feel natural. The movement should appear calm. Even the smallest fish swimming beneath painted reeds contributes to the peaceful balance of the entire chamber. This is not hurried craftsmanship. It is quiet conversation with stone. Or begin noticing the subjects surrounding you. Farmers harvest grain beneath gentle sunshine. Families prepare bread beside warm ovens. Children gather flowers. Boats glide across calm rivers. Cats sit patiently beneath chairs. Geese wander through marsh grasses. Rather than scenes of conquest, many walls celebrate ordinary life made timeless. It is a surprisingly comforting choice. Historians understand that these paintings often reflected ancient beliefs about providing the deceased with familiar comforts in the next world. Daily activities, abundant harvests, peaceful gardens, healthy animals, and generous rivers all symbolized continuity rather than ending. The tomb became less a place of final departure than a carefully prepared home for another journey. Yet many mysteries remain. Why did some artists favor certain colors while neighboring workshops chose others? How much creative freedom did individual painters enjoy? Did apprentices contribute entire sections or only smaller details? Written records rarely answer such practical questions. The walls themselves offer quiet clues. Sometimes archaeologists discover fingerprints pressed accidentally into drying plaster. Occasionally, a faint correction reveals that an outline shifted slightly before completion. In one unfinished tomb, abandoned brushes and pigment bowls remained exactly where workers left them, as though they expected to return the following morning. They never did. Centuries passed instead. You notice another painter seated cross-legged beside a palette, carved directly into a smooth stone slab. Tiny wells hold separate colors, each mixed with water and natural binding agents until they reach precisely the right consistency. Every few moments, the artist gently stirs the pigment with a slender reed, preventing it from drying beneath the warm air. Even waiting becomes part of the craft. Outside, the desert sun slowly lowers toward the western horizon. Its golden light enters the chamber at a slightly different angle, softening the colors already completed. Dust suspended in the air glows gently before settling once more upon the cool floor. The silence feels alive, not empty. Somewhere deeper inside the tomb, another artisan smooths fresh plaster across unfinished stone using a polished wooden tool. The soft scraping echoes faintly through the passageways. Without that careful foundation, no painting could survive. Invisible work supports visible beauty, as so often throughout history. You pause beside a nearly completed scene showing a family gathered beneath a sycamore tree. Their expressions remain calm, their gestures are gentle. A child reaches toward a basket of fruit while birds rest among branches overhead. Nothing dramatic occurs, yet somehow the image feels deeply human. Perhaps that is why these paintings continue speaking across thousands of years. They remind you that ordinary moments have always mattered. Shared meals, quiet work, familiar landscapes, patient hands creating something intended to outlive themselves. The painter finally leans back. A single day's work is complete. No applause follows, no crowd gathers. The chamber simply becomes a little more beautiful than it was this morning. As evening approaches, oil lamps are lit one by one, their small flames casting warm light across painted walls. Figures that seemed motionless beneath daylight now appear almost ready to step gently from the stone. You take one final look. The anonymous artist returns to preparing tomorrow's pigments without acknowledging the remarkable gift left behind for distant generations. History remembers the tomb. Far less often does it remember the steady hands that filled silent walls with peaceful life. You step back into the cooling evening air, carrying with you not only the memory of brilliant colors, but also a deeper appreciation for those whose names disappeared while their quiet artistry endured. Ahead, another forgotten occupation patiently awaits hidden within reeds beside a slow-moving river where knowledge itself begins its own remarkable journey. Section 5. The cool stillness of the painted tomb remains with you as you return to the open air. For a little while, your eyes need time to adjust to the brightness. The evening sun hangs lower now, spreading a warm golden light across the land. Gentle breezes stir the tops of tall reeds, creating soft waves that mirror the distant river flowing quietly beyond them. Dragonflies skim the surface of shallow pools, their transparent wings flashing for only a heartbeat before disappearing again. The world feels wonderfully unhurried. Every sound seems softened by water. You follow a narrow footpath winding towards the riverbank where clusters of green stalks rise several feet above your head. Their slender stems sway together with remarkable grace, brushing gently against one another, with a dry whisper that almost resembles quiet conversation. This is not wild grass. It is one of the most valuable plants in the ancient world. Waiting among these wetlands are the river papyrus harvesters, workers whose patient labor helped preserve stories, laws, poems, trade records, prayers, and everyday thoughts for thousands of years. Without them, much of what historians know about ancient civilizations might never have survived at all. Yet their names are almost entirely forgotten. You step carefully into the marsh. The ground beneath your sandals feels springy and damp. Small frogs leap into the water at your approach. White egrets stand motionless among the reeds before lifting gracefully into the air, their broad wings barely disturbing the peaceful morning. The harvesters have already begun. Each carries a curved knife polished smooth through years of use. They move slowly between the dense clusters, selecting only mature stalks that have reached the proper height and thickness. Younger plants remain untouched, allowed more time beneath the generous Egyptian sun. Nothing is taken carelessly. Every cut is deliberate. Papyrus, known scientifically as Cyperus papyrus, once flourished abundantly along the Nile and its surrounding wetlands. The plant could grow remarkably tall, often reaching well above the height of an adult. Ancient Egyptians found countless uses for it beyond writing material. Its fibers became rope baskets, sandals, mats, fishing equipment, small boats, and even portions of household furniture. Few plants serve so many purposes, yet today you follow the harvest destined for something quieter: knowledge itself. One harvester kneels beside a freshly cut stalk and trims away its feathery crown. Another removes the tough green outer layer using careful, practiced movements. Beneath the protective skin lies a pale inner pith, moist and surprisingly soft. You reach out gently. It feels cool, almost silky. The freshly exposed surface glistens faintly in the sunlight, carrying a clean, watery scent unlike any wood or grass you have encountered before. It reminds you that the river continues living inside the plant long after it has been harvested. Nearby woven baskets gradually fill with neatly prepared stalks. Children help carry lighter bundles towards shaded work areas beneath clusters of palm trees. Older workers occasionally pause to stretch tired backs before returning calmly to their task. Nobody seems to rush because haste offers little reward here. Good material rewards patience. Poor material remembers impatience forever. You follow the harvesters to a simple riverside workshop where broad wooden tables stand beneath open shelters. Here another stage quietly begins. One craftsperson slices the soft pith into remarkably thin strips using a knife sharpened until it almost glides through the moist plant. Each strip remains surprisingly flexible. They are placed side by side upon a smooth board, forming an even layer resembling pale ribbons of ivory. Then another layer is added, this time crossing the first. The arrangement resembles gentle weaving without threads. The artisan sprinkles river water across the surface before pressing everything firmly together beneath heavy stones and polished wooden boards. Gradually, the plant's own natural sap helps bind the layers into a single sheet. No glue is needed. Nature quietly provides it. The process appears wonderfully simple, yet simplicity often conceals remarkable understanding. Historians know that papyrus production became one of ancient Egypt's most significant industries. Sheets produced along the Nile traveled across the Mediterranean, reaching scholars, merchants, administrators, physicians, and poets, far beyond Egypt itself. Greek philosophers wrote upon papyrus. Roman officials kept records upon it. Contracts, letters, recipes, mathematical problems, and personal reflections all found a home upon these carefully prepared surfaces. A humble marsh plant became the memory of civilizations. The thought feels quietly astonishing. As you watch another worker smooths a partially dried sheet using a rounded stone that has become glossy from years of careful polishing. Gentle pressure removes tiny irregularities while creating a writing surface pleasant beneath a reed pen. The motion is slow, steady, almost meditative. Nearby completed sheets hang beneath the shaded awnings where warm air moves gently between them. Sunlight filters through woven reed roofs, leaving shifting patterns across pale surfaces slowly drying into their final form. The workshop smells wonderfully fresh. Wet reeds, warm water, drying fibre, fresh-cut plants, sun-warmed wood. After the richer fragrances of temple perfumes and the smoke of ancient hearths, these simple scents feel almost cleansing. You notice several workers inspecting finished sheets one by one. One is set aside, its fibres crossed unevenly. Another contains a small tear near one edge. Only the smoothest pieces will eventually carry the careful handwriting of skilled scribes. Quality begins long before ink touches the page. That quiet truth echoes through countless forgotten occupations. Archaeologists have discovered papyrus documents preserving astonishing glimpses into ordinary life. Tax receipts, shopping lists, school exercises, marriage agreements, personal letters complaining about delayed deliveries, medical instructions, children's handwriting, even humorous sketches drawn in spare moments. These surviving pages remind you that history belongs not only to rulers but also to neighbours, families, craftsmen, farmers and travellers who simply wished to record something before it slipped away. Yet much remains uncertain. Although scholars understand the general process of papyrus production remarkably well, some finer details continue to invite debate. Exactly how long certain sheets remained beneath pressure, whether workshops guarded family techniques or how regional differences influenced quality remains difficult to determine. The marsh keeps many of its secrets. Organic workshops disappear more easily than temples. Wood decays, roofs collapse, tools return quietly to the earth. The finished documents survived far more often than the places where they were created. You watch an elderly artisan lift a completed sheet toward the afternoon light. They study its texture with thoughtful eyes, turning it gently until the surface catches the sun. Satisfied, they nod almost imperceptibly before placing it atop a growing stack. No celebration follows. Only another sheet begins. The rhythm feels comfortingly familiar now, like the firekeeper tending embers, like the shell collectors watching the tide, like the perfume grinder circling stone upon stone, like the tomb painter patiently filling silent walls. Each occupation asks for careful attention rather than dramatic effort. Each quietly shapes the future. A soft breeze ripples across the Nile, carrying distant sounds of waterbirds settling among reeds for the evening. Somewhere upstream, a small fishing boat drifts homeward beneath a linen sail glowing amber in the lowering sun. The day's work gradually comes to an end. Bundles of unused papyrus wait for tomorrow's harvest. Fresh sheets continue drying beneath the fading light. Soon they will carry voices that have not yet been spoken. Perhaps a poem, perhaps a prayer, perhaps a merchant's account, perhaps a child's first careful writing lesson. No one here can know which pages will survive for thousands of years. They simply prepare each one with equal care. As you leave the riverside workshop, the gentle rustling of papyrus fades behind you, blending once more with the steady murmur of flowing water. Ahead, another forgotten occupation awaits in a place where stone streets, echoing footsteps, and surprisingly ordinary routines reveal yet another hidden corner of the ancient world. Section 6. The gentle rustling of papyrus slowly fades into the distance as your path leaves the quiet wetlands behind. For a time, the only sound accompanying you is the steady rhythm of your own footsteps. The road grows wider beneath worn sandals. Dust rises lightly with each step before settling again upon smooth stone. Olive trees become less frequent, replaced by rows of sturdy buildings whose tiled roofs catch the warm glow of the late afternoon. Ahead, a city slowly reveals itself. Its walls appear first, then towers, then broad gates standing open to welcome merchants, travellers, farmers and craftsmen returning before sunset. The air feels different here. Instead of reeds and river water, you notice the mingled scents of fresh bread, wood smoke, olive oil, damp stone leather, and countless evening meals beginning to simmer behind open windows. Somewhere nearby, a blacksmith strikes metal with slow, measured blows. A donkey's hooves echo softly along the paved street before disappearing around a corner. Life flows calmly, almost effortlessly. You pass small bakeries where warm loaves cool upon wooden racks. Children chase one another through narrow lanes before being gently called home. Shopkeepers sweep dust from stone thresholds. Water trickles continuously from public fountains into shallow basins polished smooth by generations of waiting hands. Everything seems carefully arranged, even the ordinary routines. This city is Rome, not the Rome of triumphant generals or magnificent not the Rome of marble statues standing proudly in public squares. Instead, you discover the Rome experienced by hundreds of thousands of ordinary people who shared streets, marketplaces, bathhouses, apartments, workshops, and public conveniences every single day. Among them works someone history almost never introduces, the keeper of the public sponge. You continue walking until you reach a modest stone building tucked quietly beside a busy marketplace. Nothing about its entrance suggests importance. People come and go without ceremony. Conversations continue uninterrupted. No one pauses to admire the architecture. Yet the building performs an essential service. Inside, the temperature drops pleasantly. Soft daylight enters through high openings near the roof, leaving much of the room comfortably shaded. Stone benches line the walls in careful rows, each seat carved with surprising precision. Beneath them flows a narrow channel of continuously moving water. The sound is gentle. A quiet stream, never completely sung. Public latrines formed an ordinary part of life throughout many Roman towns and cities. Archaeologists have uncovered hundreds of them, revealing remarkably sophisticated systems that combined flowing water drainage and communal design. To modernize, the arrangement may appear unusual, but for Roman citizens it represented practical urban planning. Nothing here feels hidden or embarrassing. People enter, calmly exchange greetings, discuss business, and continue their daily routines, much as they might at a neighborhood fountain or bakery. It reminds you that customs change across centuries. What feels familiar in one age may seem surprising in another. Near the entrance stands a worker carrying a simple wooden bucket. Inside rests a long-handled sponge. This is one of the keeper's responsibilities. The sponge itself appears soft and surprisingly beautiful, its natural texture resembling delicate honeycomb. Collected from the Mediterranean Sea, such sponges served many household purposes because they absorbed water exceptionally well. Here they served another practical role. The keeper quietly tends them throughout the day. Nearby stands a shallow basin filled with fresh water mixed with vinegar or saltwater substances that ancient Romans believed helped clean the sponge between uses. Historians generally agree that these solutions formed part of routine maintenance, although exactly how consistently every public latrine followed similar practices remains uncertain. The surviving stone buildings tell part of the story. Daily habits tell far less. You watch the keeper move with calm efficiency. They replace worn sponges, refill water channels, sweep scattered debris from the floor, inspect drainage openings, carry away waste. None of the tasks invite admiration, yet each contributes quietly to the comfort of countless strangers. Success here means remaining unnoticed. Much like the firekeeper you met many evenings ago, The finest work prevents inconvenience before anyone realizes it might occur. The keeper pauses beside one of the flowing channels, removing a small branch carried downstream from yesterday's storm. It would have caused little trouble now, but perhaps greater difficulty later. Small attentions preserve larger systems. Depend upon such people, far more than monuments. The stone beneath your feet feels cool despite the warmth outside. Centuries of flowing water have polished its surface until it almost reflects the light filtering through narrow windows. Tiny ripples shimmer gently along the channels, carrying away whatever the day quietly leaves behind. Fresh air enters continuously through carefully positioned openings. Roman engineers understood ventilation remarkably well. The room never feels stagnant. Instead, a faint scent of running water mingles with limestone damp stone olive oil, soap lingering from nearby bathhouses, and the earthy smell of clay pipes hidden beneath the streets. Those pipes fascinate you. Far below the city, an intricate network quietly carries water where it is needed and removes it when its work is finished. Aqueducts bring fresh supplies across astonishing distances. Gravity performs nearly all the labor, asking only careful planning from the engineers who designed the system. The keeper understands only a small part of that immense network, yet their daily attention keeps one important piece functioning smoothly. Outside evening shadows lengthen across the marketplace. Merchants begin packing woven baskets filled with figs, onions, olives, and fresh herbs. A fish seller rinses wooden tables before tomorrow's catch arrives. Bakers stack empty flour sacks neatly against cool walls. Everywhere you look, someone quietly prepares the city for another day. Maintenance rarely appears in poetry, yet civilization quietly rests upon it. An unusual detail uncovered by archaeologists continues to delight historians. Some Roman public latrines contain decorative mosaics, painted walls, or even carved marble features. Practical places could still possess beauty. Cleanliness and craftsmanship were not considered opposing ideas. Even ordinary buildings deserved thoughtful design. That quiet philosophy lingers here. You notice the keeper carefully examining the sponge before placing it into fresh water once again. Their hands move with practiced confidence. They have likely repeated this simple motion thousands of times. No audience gathers. No inscription records the moment. Yet tomorrow, hundreds of people will benefit from these unnoticed actions. Historians continue debating many aspects of daily sanitation in the Roman world. How frequently individual facilities were cleaned, whether responsibilities shifted between public officials and private contractors, or how regional customs differed across the vast empire often remains uncertain. Archaeological evidence offers valuable clues, but everyday routines rarely leave complete records. Ordinary life fades more easily than stone. Still enough survives to glimpse remarkable organization. As twilight settles over, the city lamps begin appearing one by one behind nearby windows. Their warm light reflects softly upon damp stone floors. Outside voices become quieter as families gather for evening meals. Somewhere in the distance, a musician plays a gentle melody upon a reed flute, its notes drifting through narrow streets before dissolving into the cooling air. The keeper finishes one final inspection. The water continues flowing. Everything remains in order. Without ceremony, they gather their bucket lift, the well-used sponge, and disappear into the evening, leaving behind a place prepared for tomorrow's countless ordinary visitors. Few will remember the worker. Almost everyone will appreciate the result. You step back onto the stone street where the first stars begin appearing above tiled rooftops. Ahead, your path turns away from the bustling city toward cooler mountains, where another, forgotten occupation patiently waits among snow, wind, and winter itself. House Section 7. The warm stone streets of Rome gradually disappear behind you. For a while, you can still hear faint echoes of the city. A distant cart rattles over worn paving stones. Someone closes a wooden shutter. A dog barks once before settling for the night. Then those familiar sounds fade into the landscape, replaced by the quieter voice of open country. The road begins to climb. Olive groves slowly give way to oak forests. The air becomes noticeably cooler with every gentle turn of the path. You breathe deeply and notice how different this mountain air feels. It carries the clean scent of pine needles, warmed by the afternoon sun, damp moss clinging to shaded rocks, and the faint mineral fragrance of streams flowing somewhere beyond the trees. The climb is steady, never hurried. As evening approaches, the forest begins preparing for another peaceful night. Tiny birds settle among high branches. Cicadas slowly surrender their chorus to crickets. Ferns catch the last rays of sunlight before long shadows quietly spread across the forest floor. Far above, patches of snow remain visible. Even in summer, you continue upward until the trees begin to thin. The landscape opens into rolling alpine meadows where wildflowers sway gently beneath a cool breeze. Sheep graze quietly under the watchful eyes of shepherds wrapped in thick woolen cloaks despite the lingering warmth below. The mountains hold on to winter, long after the valleys have forgotten it. You pass beside a narrow stream so clear that every smooth pebble beneath the water seems close enough to touch. The water feels astonishingly cold against your fingertips. It has only recently melted from snow resting high among distant peaks. Someone else notices something different. Opportunity. Waiting beside a small stone shelter are several workers carrying wooden sleds, thick ropes, sturdy iron hooks, and insulated baskets lined with straw. Their tools seem strangely out of place beneath the gentle summer sky. You have arrived among the ancient ice collectors. Long before electricity quietly hummed inside modern homes, before refrigerators preserved fresh food, and centuries before ice could be manufactured by machines, communities discovered ways to harvest nature's winter gift and carefully protect it through the hottest months of the year. It required remarkable patience and remarkable planning. You continue climbing until patches of lingering snow become fields of hard-packed ice resting inside shaded mountain hollows. Here, sunlight reaches the ground only briefly each day. Cold air settles naturally into the landscape, preserving thick layers that have survived many warm afternoons. The collectors work in calm silence. One studies the surface carefully before choosing where to cut. Another arranges straw inside a waiting cart. A third checks thick ropes for signs of wear. No movement is wasted. You notice the tools more closely. Broad iron picks loosen large blocks. Wooden wedges gently separate them. Long-handled chisels smooth rough edges. Each strike echoes softly across the mountain valley before disappearing into the distance. The sound feels strangely peaceful. Stone, ice, silence. Again, the block slowly begins to move. It glistens beneath the lowering sun, revealing tiny bubbles trapped months earlier when snow first settled across these mountains. Every crystal catches the light differently, turning an ordinary chunk of frozen water into something quietly beautiful. One collector smiles faintly, not because the work is easy, because this block survived another season. Ancient Persia, Greece, Rome, China, and several other civilizations all developed ingenious methods for storing natural ice. Wealthy households, royal courts, physicians, and sometimes entire communities benefited from carefully preserved winter ice kept inside specially designed ice houses, deep underground chambers, or insulated storage buildings. Some Persian structures known today as yakhchals were especially remarkable. Their thick mud brick walls and clever engineering allowed ice to remain through intense summer heat. In other regions, mountain ice was harvested and transported carefully downhill using animals, sleds, or human labor before disappearing into cool storage until needed. The engineering still impresses historians. The workers impress you even more. Harvesting begins long before sunrise whenever possible. Cold temperatures reduce melting. Every minute matters. You help steady one of the sleds as another ice block is gently lowered into place. Straw cushions its sides, wool blankets cover the top. Additional layers of dried grass fill every empty space, reducing warm air that might hasten melting during the long journey downward. The collectors think constantly about heat, even while surrounded by cold. A soft wind sweeps across the ridge, carrying the sharp, refreshing scent of snow mixed with evergreen forests far below. You pull your cloak a little tighter. The temperature continues falling as evening approaches. The workers hardly seem to notice. Their bodies understand these mountains. One older collector pauses beside a rocky ledge overlooking the valley. Below, tiny villages scatter across fertile plains where vineyards, orchards, and wheat fields glow softly beneath the setting sun. Everything down there appears warm, comfortable, far away. Soon these blocks of mountain ice will travel toward those distant settlements. Some may cool precious medicines prepared by healers. Others might preserve fresh fish arriving from coastal markets. Noble households may serve chilled fruit during midsummer feasts. Temples could protect sacred offerings requiring cooler temperatures. Few people enjoying those comforts will imagine the mountain where the journey began. History often celebrates luxury. It quietly forgets logistics. You notice another fascinating detail. Several collectors deliberately choose blocks from the deepest shaded areas rather than those lying nearest the surface. Experience has taught them that older denser ice melts more slowly. Such observations were learned through generations of careful practice rather than scientific formulas. Knowledge accumulated one winter at a time. Not inside classrooms, but beneath open skies. Historians remain uncertain about many practical details surrounding ancient ice collection. Exactly how much ice disappeared through melting during transport, how often storage houses required replenishment, or how different regions balance cost with necessity continues to invite research. Written records often describe the finished luxury rather than the difficult harvest itself. The mountains remain quieter than the documents. They reveal only what patient observation allows. As twilight deepens, the final sled begins its careful descent. Wooden runners glide smoothly over damp grass before reaching rougher paths carved into the hillside. Oxen move steadily without haste, their slow rhythm perfectly matched to the fragile cargo. Nobody urges them forward. Speed would waste ice. Patience preserves it. You walk beside the procession for a while. Small droplets form where evening warmth touches exposed corners of frozen blocks. They catch the fading sunlight like tiny jewels before slipping silently onto the earth. Nothing lasts forever. The collectors know this better than anyone. Their occupation revolves around delaying an inevitable change. Winter becoming water, cold becoming warmth, snow becoming memory. Yet within that temporary gift, entire communities discover comfort during the hottest days of the year. The first stars appear overhead as you reach the lower slopes once more. Forest scents return. Owls begin calling from hidden branches. Somewhere below, village lights flicker gently into life, welcoming another peaceful evening. Behind you, the mountains settle quietly into darkness, still guarding countless patches of snow that will wait patiently for tomorrow's careful harvest. Ahead, another forgotten occupation listens not with eyes or hands, but with extraordinary ears where the hidden voice of bronze itself reveals secrets that only a few patient people ever learn to hear. Subsection 8. The cool breath of the mountains remains with you long after the last patches of snow disappear behind rolling hills. As you descend into gentler country, the air slowly grows warmer once again. Pine forests become mixed woodlands where maple oak and beech spread broad canopies across winding roads. Small streams cross your path, their clear water slipping quietly beneath stone bridges built so carefully that they seem to belong to the landscape itself. Morning arrives softly. Mist rests over distant fields. The world seems wrapped in pale silver. You continue walking until the familiar sounds of birdsong are joined by something altogether different. A single deep note. It hangs in the cool air longer than you expect. Then another follows. Not louder, only fuller. The sound rolls gently across the valley before dissolving into silence. Somewhere nearby, a great bronze bell has spoken. You follow its fading echo toward a temple complex standing upon a gentle rise. The buildings are neither extravagant nor imposing. Their wooden beams have darkened through countless seasons of sun and rain. Stone paths wind between quiet gardens where moss carpets shaded corners and carefully trimmed shrubs soften the edges of ancient walls. The morning feels wonderfully still. No hurried footsteps disturb the peace. The bell tower stands slightly apart from the other buildings, rising above tiled roofs, with quiet confidence. Suspended within it hangs an enormous bronze bell, its surface covered with elegant patterns worn smooth where generations of hands have gently touched the metal before ceremonies. Its size is astonishing, its silence even more so. Standing beneath it is someone history almost never introduces, the bronze bell listener. At first, the occupation seems almost impossible to understand. After all, anyone can hear a bell. But only a few people learned how to truly listen. Before modern instruments could measure subtle imperfections in cast bronze, skilled listeners judged the quality of great bells using nothing more than patient ears, careful attention, and years of accumulated experience. Their task was not simply to hear the sound, it was to understand it. You remove your sandals before stepping onto polished wooden flooring inside the tower. The timber feels smooth beneath your feet, warmed gently by sunlight filtering through wide openings on every side. A cool breeze moves quietly through the structure, carrying faint scents of cedar, old bronze incense drifting from nearby halls and damp earth after the night's light rain. Everything invites stillness. The listener welcomes it. An elderly craftsperson stands beside the suspended bell holding a simple wooden mallet wrapped with tightly bound leather. Their clothing bears no ornament suggesting special status. Their hands appear ordinary except for the slight calluses left by years of careful work. Without speaking, they bow gently toward the bell. Then they strike. Not hard, not softly, just enough. The note blooms through the tower with remarkable grace. It does not simply ring, it seems to unfold, layer after layer, each tone resting gently upon the one before it. The deep foundation remains steady, while brighter harmonics shimmer above it like sunlight dancing across calm water. The listener closes their eyes. No movement follows, no movement follows, only listening. Several long breaths pass before they finally nod. Satisfied. You find yourself listening differently as well. At first you noticed only volume, now you begin hearing complexity. One vibration fades quickly while another lingers. Certain tones seem to drift toward distant hills before slowly returning as gentle echoes. The silence afterward becomes part of the music. Ancient China, Korea, Japan, and other cultures developed extraordinary traditions surrounding large ceremonial bells. These remarkable instruments announced the passing of time, welcomed worshippers, marked important ceremonies, warned communities of danger, and filled quiet valleys with sounds that travelled astonishing distances. Casting such bells required exceptional skill. Testing them required another. If hidden air pockets formed inside the bronze, if the metal cooled unevenly, or if tiny cracks developed during casting, the bell's voice would reveal the flaw long before human eyes could discover it. The listener learned to hear those secrets. One unusual historical detail continues to fascinate researchers. Some master bell founders reportedly recognized specific imperfections simply by the way certain overtones faded or vibrated against one another. Rather than describing problems mathematically, they often compared sounds to familiar experiences. One bell might breathe too quickly. Another held its voice. A third spoke with a tired heart. Their language belonged to listening rather than engineering. You watch as another bell receives its examination. This one is smaller. Its sound feels brighter. The listener walks slowly around it while the note continues singing through the air. Occasionally they pause beside particular sections of the bronze, tilting their head almost imperceptibly. Their ears become measuring instruments, refined through decades. Nearby rests a collection of curious tools, wooden mallets of different sizes, small bronze hammers, polished tuning forks in later periods, thin cords used to suspend smaller bells during testing. None appear complicated. The greatest instrument remains the human ear. Outside Templar life continues gently. Monks sweep fallen leaves from stone paths using long bamboo brooms whose soft brushing sounds blend naturally with birds calling from nearby trees. Gardeners trim carefully shaped pines. Visitors pause beside ponds where koi move slowly beneath floating lily pads. The entire temple seems to breathe, though. Do something breathe together. Sound belongs to that rhythm. You notice something remarkable. No one interrupts the listener. Even those passing nearby instinctively lower their voices while testing continues. Respect surrounds the occupation, not because it appears dramatic, but because everyone understands that careful listening requires quiet. How rarely history pauses long enough to listen. Historians know that bells often represented far more than practical tools. In many cultures they symbolized harmony, spiritual awakening, the passage of time, or communication between earthly communities and sacred spaces. Their voices measured mornings, welcomed festivals, comforted mourners, and reminded distant villagers that another peaceful day had begun. Yet uncertainty remains. Exactly how individual listeners were trained is not always clear. Some knowledge almost certainly passed from master to apprentice through repeated demonstrations rather than written instruction. We possess magnificent surviving bells, but far fewer descriptions of the conversations that surrounded their testing. The sound survived, the lessons faded. Perhaps that is fitting. You stand beside an apprentice watching attentively as the elder strikes the bell once more. The younger listener guesses quietly. The elder smiles, then gently shakes their head. Not quite. Without criticism, they strike again. The difference seems impossibly small. Yet after listening carefully, even you begin noticing it. A faint vibration disappears slightly sooner than before. The note feels just a little less balanced. Tiny differences matter, especially when preserved across generations. The morning sun climbs higher, warming the bronze until it glows softly beneath the temple roof. Light catches carved patterns of clouds, lotus blossoms, and flowing vines decorating the great bell's surface. They appear almost alive as shadows shift gently across the metal. The listener completes one final examination. The bell has passed. Its voice remains true. No certificate is awarded. No crowd applauds. The bell simply continues its quiet service calling future generations together with a sound that carries the careful attention of forgotten ears. You leave the tower as another deep note rolls peacefully across the valley. It follows you along the stone path, growing softer with every step until it blends once more with rustling leaves and distant birdsong. A head beyond gardens, bright with morning light, another forgotten occupation patiently waits inside royal workshops where delicate feathers, patient fingers, and extraordinary craftsmanship quietly transform the ordinary gifts of birds into symbols of beauty, ceremony, and power. Section 9. The final echo of the great bronze bell follows you for a surprisingly long time. Even after the temple disappears behind rows of cedar trees, its voice seems to linger somewhere beyond hearing, as though the valley itself has quietly remembered the note. The peaceful sound fades little by little, until it is replaced by gentler companions. Leaves rustle overhead. A stream slips over smooth stones. Somewhere nearby a dove calls once before returning to silence. The road begins to descend again. This time it leads toward a city unlike the bustling Rome you visited before. Wide avenues stretch toward elegant palaces surrounded by carefully tended gardens. Cypress trees stand in patient rows beside reflecting pools where lilies float beneath broad green leaves. Every hedge appears thoughtfully shaped. Every courtyard seems designed to invite slow footsteps rather than hurried ones. The air carries another new fragrance. Fresh-cut grass, flowering jasmine, polished cedar, a faint trace of beeswax warming beneath the morning sun. You pass gardeners trimming shrubs with remarkable precision. Nearby servants carry baskets filled with figs, grapes, and fragrant herbs toward shaded kitchens. A fountain murmurs quietly in the center of a marble courtyard where swallows dip low to catch insects dancing above the water. Nothing here feels loud. Luxury, at least in this moment, seems almost whisper-soft. Beyond another carved wooden doorway lies a workshop that few visitors ever entered. Its windows are broad to welcome gentle daylight, yet woven curtains soften the brightness to protect delicate materials. Long wooden tables stand neatly arranged beneath the filtered light. Shelves hold carefully sorted bundles wrapped in linen cloth. At first glance they resemble flowers. Then you notice the colors: emerald green, brilliant sapphire, soft ivory, golden amber, crimson, silver grey. The shelves are filled with feathers. You have arrived at the workshop of the palace feather arranger. History often celebrates magnificent crowns, ceremonial robes, royal fans, elaborate headdresses, and banners fluttering above processions. Yet remarkably few stories pause to remember the patient artisans whose careful hands selected, clean-shaped, matched, and arranged every feather long before those objects ever appeared in public. The beauty began here. Quietly, you step closer. The room feels astonishingly peaceful. Tiny feathers drift lazily through narrow beams of sunlight before settling onto polished wooden floors. The air smells faintly of cedar chests, beeswax, soft leather, linen cloth, and freshly washed feathers drying upon woven racks. One artisan carefully lifts a single peacock feather. They hold it toward the light, not to admire it, to examine it. The brilliant eye at its center catches changing colors as the feather slowly turns between patient fingers. Green becomes blue, blue becomes bronze, bronze slips quietly back into emerald again. Nature has already created perfection. The artisan's task is simply not to disturb it. Many ancient civilizations treasured feathers for far more than decoration. In ancient Egypt, ostrich feathers symbolized truth through the goddess Mahat. Across the Americas, particularly among the Aztec and Maya master featherworkers, created astonishing mosaics, ceremonial garments and shields using brilliantly colored tropical birds. In imperial China, certain feathers signified rank or official honor. Elsewhere, they adorned fans' helmets, parasols, musical instruments, and sacred objects. Every feather carried meaning, not merely beauty. The artisan seated nearest you begins sorting dozens of nearly identical white feathers. Only nearly. Their trained eyes notice subtle differences invisible to most people. One curves slightly left, another bends gently right, a third narrows almost imperceptibly near its tip. The smallest variation determines its proper place. Nothing is chosen by chance. Nearby rests an assortment of delicate tools: fine bronze scissors, tiny awls, bone needles, soft brushes woven from animal hair, thin cords spun from silk and flax, small bowls containing natural adhesives prepared from fish glue or plant resins. Each tool appears remarkably modest. Together they create extraordinary work. You watch an apprentice cleaning a long crane feather using nothing more than careful fingers and gentle breaths. Dust disappears strand by strand. Bent fibers are coaxed patiently back into alignment. If rushed, the feather would never recover its graceful form. Patience restores what force cannot. The lesson feels familiar now. You have encountered it beside sacred fires, coastal rocks, temple workshops, painted tombs, papyrus marshes, Roman streets, mountain ice, and bronze bells. Forgotten occupations often share the same quiet virtue: steady attention. Outside, a gentle breeze stirs flowering vines climbing the palace walls. Their blossoms release a sweet fragrance that drifts softly into the workshop, mingling with the natural scent of clean feathers warmed by sunlight. The atmosphere feels almost weightless. You notice another artisan assembling an elaborate ceremonial fan. Its wooden frame has already been carved from pale maple and polished until it feels smooth as river stone. Now feathers are added one by one, not in random order, but according to carefully planned symmetry. A slightly longer feather balances another across the center. Colors deepen gradually rather than abruptly. The finished design appears effortless precisely because it required so much thought. Historians know that some feather workshops enjoyed remarkable prestige. Among the Aztec Empire, for example, highly skilled feather artists known today by the Nahuatl term amanteca produced intricate work so valuable that they were reserved for rulers, nobles, priests, and ceremonial occasions. Their creations combined artistry with extraordinary technical skill, often arranging thousands of tiny feathers into shimmering images that changed appearance as light moved across their surfaces. Some examples still survive. Most have quietly disappeared. Feathers are beautiful. They are also fragile. Humidity changes them. Insects damage them. Sunlight slowly fades their colors. Entire masterpieces have vanished, leaving only written descriptions and the occasional surviving fragment preserved under unusually favorable conditions. Much of the craft remains uncertain. Researchers continue debating precisely how certain adhesives were prepared, how workshops organized production, and whether particular bird species were bred specifically for their feathers or gathered primarily through seasonal trade. The birds have kept some of their secrets. You pause beside a cabinet containing carefully labeled bundles. Each group has been wrapped separately, not because of color alone, because texture matters just as much. Some feathers remain soft enough to brush gently across skin. Others possess remarkable stiffness suitable for ceremonial standards. Still others shimmer differently beneath morning or evening light. The artisans know every distinction. They scarcely need to speak. Knowledge passes quietly through observation. An apprentice reaches for the wrong bundle. The master smiles warmly. Without criticism, they gently exchange it for another. The lesson requires only a nod. Outside palace musicians begin practicing somewhere across the gardens. The distant sound of stringed instruments drifts faintly through open windows, blending with fountains and birdsong. The workshop continues its calm rhythm, each feather finding its proper place as though guided by invisible order. Hours pass almost unnoted. The completed fan finally rises from the work table. No single feather demands attention. Together they create harmony. Perhaps that is the true achievement, not individual beauty, shared balance. You realize that many remarkable objects throughout history depended upon workers whose names never appeared beside the finished masterpiece. The ruler carrying this fan may be remembered for centuries. The artisan who patiently aligned every feather almost certainly will not. Yet one could never have existed without the other. As afternoon sunlight softens toward evening, finished creations are carefully wrapped inside protective linen and placed into carved cedar chests. Their journey has only begun. Soon they will appear during ceremonies, festivals, royal audiences, or sacred processions. The workshop itself grows quiet once more. A few loose feathers continue drifting gently through the warm air before finally settling upon the polished floor. You leave carrying one final image, not of kings, not of crowns, but of patient hands holding something so light that even the smallest careless movement might have scattered months of careful work. Ahead beyond the palace gardens, another forgotten occupation waits where voices, memory, and gentle sorrow quietly become a profession unlike any other in the ancient world. Hack Section 10. The last feather settles quietly onto the polished workshop floor as you continue your gentle journey. For a while, you carry with you the memory of those patient hands arranging colors too delicate to hurry. Outside the palace walls, the evening air feels softer than before. The sun has begun its slow descent, washing the landscape in warm amber light that turns every stone path and olive branch into something almost golden. A cool breeze stirs the tall grasses. Swallows glide low across open fields. The world seems to slow with them. Your road now leaves behind royal gardens and carefully tended courtyards. Instead, it follows a broad track lined with weathered cypress trees whose long shadows stretch across the earth like quiet companions. Travelers pass from time to time, offering polite nods before continuing toward villages preparing for the evening. No one appears hurried. The day is gently folding itself away. Ahead, you notice a small procession moving at an unhurried pace. Men and women walk together, dressed in simple linen garments. Some carry woven baskets filled with flowers. Others hold clay oil lamps, though the fading sunlight has not yet required their gentle flames. Children remain unusually quiet, walking close beside older relatives, whose faces show reflection more than sadness. No voices rise above conversation. Even footsteps seem softer. You soon understand that you have joined a funeral procession, not one filled with loud cries or dramatic displays, but with the calm dignity that many ancient communities believed honored both the living and the dead. The people gathered here have known this moment would come, and they move together with remarkable gentleness. Yet among them walk several strangers. At first they seem no different. Their clothing is plain, their pace measured. Only when the singing begins do you notice their purpose. These are the professional mourning singers. History often remembers magnificent tombs, carved monuments, and elaborate burial ceremonies. Much less frequently does it remember the individuals whose voices carried communities through moments of farewell, helping families express emotions that words alone sometimes could not reach. You follow quietly. The first voice rises almost like a breeze. It is neither loud nor theatrical. Instead, it floats gently above the procession, with slow-flowing phrases that seem designed to match the rhythm of walking feet. Another voice joins from behind, then another. Soon several melodies weave together, not perfectly, beautifully. Their harmonies drift across the evening fields, blending with distant birdsong and the rustling of leaves overhead. Every note feels patient, allowing silence to exist between phrases, rather than filling every moment with sound. The pauses matter, perhaps as much as the singing itself. Professional mourners appeared in many ancient cultures, including Egypt, Greece, Rome, China, and parts of the Near East. Their roles varied from place to place, but they often helped lead funeral rituals, preserve traditional songs, and give voice to emotions that families found difficult to express during times of grief. Their work was surprisingly skilled. It demanded memory, sensitivity, timing, above all compassion. You notice one older singer watching the family more closely than the road ahead. Their attention remains fixed upon subtle changes in the mourner's expressions. If someone begins quietly weeping, the melody softens. If the procession pauses, the voices settle gently into silence before beginning again. Nothing feels rehearsed. Everything responds naturally. The songs themselves are unfamiliar to you. Their words speak of rivers continuing beyond the horizon, gardens blooming without end, familiar homes remembered through changing seasons, and ancestors waiting beneath peaceful trees. Rather than dwelling upon loss alone, they gently remind listeners that memory continues long after footsteps disappear. The language changes across civilization. The comfort remains remarkably similar. One unusual historical detail survives from ancient Egypt, where artistic depictions sometimes show women hired specifically to participate in funeral ceremonies. Certain mourners even represented the goddesses Isis and Nephthys through ritual lamentation, their symbolic presence believed to assist the deceased on the next stage of the journey. Elsewhere, traditions evolved differently. In parts of the ancient Mediterranean, families sometimes invited singers whose voices preserved local melodies known for generations. These songs became part of community memory, passed from one funeral to the next, changing slowly while remaining comfortingly familiar. No written music survives for many of them, only echoes. You reach the burial place as twilight begins settling over the countryside. Tall cypress trees surround a peaceful hillside where simple stone markers stand among wildflowers. Bees still wander lazily between blossoms despite the approaching evening. The scent of thyme rises gently whenever someone brushes against the growing plants. The air feels calm, almost embracing. The singers arrange themselves quietly near the family. One begins a melody alone. The others answer. Their voices never compete. Instead, they seem to support one another, like carefully woven threads, each carrying part of a larger pattern impossible for a single singer to create alone. Listening closely, you realize the songs contain names, not only the name of the person being remembered, but parents, grandparents, villages, rivers, mountains, occupation, harvests, tiny details of ordinary life. In this way, music becomes a memory. The profession requires astonishing recall. Some singers likely remember dozens, perhaps hundreds of traditional verses suited for different families, seasons, or circumstances. Others may have adapted familiar melodies to include personal stories known within the community. Historians cannot always determine how much was improvised. That uncertainty feels strangely appropriate. Living traditions rarely fit neatly inside written records. Nearby, an elderly woman smiles through quiet tears as one verse recalls her husband's childhood habit of climbing fig trees before sunrise. Several younger listeners exchange gentle smiles as well. The song has done something remarkable. It has carried memory safely into shared experience. No one stands alone. I begin to understand that professional mourning was never simply about expressing sadness. It was also about preserving belonging, about reminding communities that every ordinary life left gentle traces in the hearts of others. The singers become guardians of those traces. As darkness deepens, small oil lamps are lit one by one. Their golden light flickers softly across weathered stone and gently moving faces. Crickets begin their evening chorus while stars quietly emerge above the darkening hills. The songs become slower now, lower, almost whispered. The wind carries their final notes across nearby vineyards before they gradually dissolve into the growing night. No applause follows, only grateful silence. One by one, the singers greet family members with quiet respect before gathering their simple belongings. They accept modest gifts of bread, olives, or woven cloth offered in thanks. Their reward is seldom wealth. It is trust. Communities invite them into life's most fragile moments, believing their voices can help carry sorrow gently enough that it does not become too heavy to bear. That is extraordinary work, though history rarely pauses to celebrate it. Many questions remain unanswered. Scholars continue discussing how professional mourners were trained, whether certain families practiced the occupation across generations, or how melodies changed as they traveled between neighboring regions. Music fades quickly unless someone continues singing it. Most ancient songs have vanished into silence, yet perhaps fragments still survive hidden inside later traditions whose oldest roots reach farther back than anyone can fully trace. You take one last look across the peaceful hillside. The lamps glow softly beneath the stars. The family begins its slow walk home. The singers disappear along another quiet path, carrying their voices toward the next village where someday they will once again transform remembrance into gentle music. You continue onward beneath the clear night sky. Ahead beyond fields, silvered by moonlight and deserts waiting beyond the horizon, another forgotten occupation quietly awaits one whose remarkable knowledge could find fresh water where others saw only endless dry earth. Section 11. The final notes of the morning singers remain with you long after their voices have faded into the night. They linger softly in memory, blending with the gentle chorus of crickets and the quiet rustle of leaves stirred by a cool breeze. Above you, countless stars stretch across the sky with extraordinary clarity. Without the glow of modern lights, every constellation seems brighter, every distant planet more certain of its place. You continue walking beneath them. The road grows quieter. The land slowly changes once again. The fertile fields gradually disappear behind you. Olive groves become scattered shrubs. Tall grasses give way to dry, wind-shaped bushes clinging patiently to rocky ground. The air loses its gentle fragrance of flowers and becomes cleaner, sharper touched with warm stone and sun-baked earth. Morning arrives before you realize the night has passed. The sunrise is gentle. Soft gold spills across a landscape that seems almost endless. Ahead stretches a wide desert plain where low hills shimmer beneath the growing light. The ground appears dry beyond imagination, broken only by scattered acacia trees whose twisted branches offer precious islands of shade. At first glance, the landscape seems empty. Then you begin noticing its quiet details. Tiny bird tracks crossing fine sand. A line of ants carrying seeds toward hidden nests. The pale green leaves of a shrub somehow thriving where nothing else appears to grow. Life is everywhere. It simply asks you to look more carefully. You are not alone on the trail. A small caravan moves steadily across the open country. Camels carry woven bundles secured with leather straps. Donkeys walk calmly behind them, their hooves leaving neat patterns in the sand. Travelers wear light linen robes that flutter gently in the warm breeze, while broad woven hats protect their faces from the strengthening sun. Leading them walks someone whose eyes never seem to rest. This is the desert well finder. History remembers caravans laden with silk spices, salt, incense, copper, and precious stones. It remembers the cities connected by famous trade routes. Yet far less often does it remember the remarkable individuals whose knowledge allowed those journeys to happen at all. Without water, no road existed. Without the well finder, many travelers never reached their destination. You walk beside the guide. They carry remarkably little. A wooden staff polished smooth by years of use. A leather water skin. A small pouch containing dried dates and flatbread. No maps. No compass. No written direction. Instead, their knowledge lives entirely within observation and memory. The desert becomes their library. Every hill is a page, every stone another sentence. As the morning grows warmer, the guide pauses beside a cluster of weathered rocks. They kneel without speaking, running gentle fingers across the ground before lifting a handful of dry sand. You expect them to examine the sand itself. Instead, they release it. The wind quietly carries it away. The guide watches. Only watches. The smallest movement matters. The breeze reveals subtle patterns impossible to notice while standing. Tiny ridges indicate prevailing winds. Fine grains collect differently where hidden moisture lies deeper beneath the surface. The observations appear almost invisible until someone teaches the eye to recognize them. Generations of experience speak silently. Nearby a desert lark lands briefly upon a low shrub before flying toward the east. The guide notices. So do you. But they understand something more. Birds rarely waste energy flying unnecessary distances in dry country. Certain species remain surprisingly faithful to reliable water sources, especially during hotter seasons. Watching their daily movements sometimes offers valuable clues. Nature becomes a quiet companion, not an obstacle. One well-established historical fact appears again and again across desert civilizations. Caravan routes throughout regions such as North Africa, Arabia, Persia, and Central Asia depended upon carefully maintained well springs and seasonal water sources. Many of these locations became trading posts, villages, or entire cities because travelers knew fresh water could be found there. The wells shaped history, long before roads did. The guide continues walking with slow confidence. Every so often they stop beside particular plants. One acacia grows unusually tall. Another cluster of reeds appears where no stream is visible. Farther ahead, salt-tolerant shrubs become less common while grasses quietly increase. These changes seem insignificant, yet together they form a conversation. The land is speaking. The guide simply understands its language. You remember the firekeeper reading smoke, the shell collector reading tides, the bell listener reading sound. Now another forgotten worker reads the earth itself. By midday, the heat settles across the desert with remarkable steadiness. The air shimmers above pale stones. Lizards retreat beneath shaded rocks. Even insects seem to move more slowly beneath the bright sun. The caravan rests beneath a broad acacia. Its shade is precious. Camels kneel with grateful sighs while travelers quietly share dried fruit. Coarse bread, olives, and cool water poured carefully from clay-lined skins. No drop is wasted. The well-finder drinks last, not from obligation, from habit. After the brief meal, the guide walks alone toward a shallow depression, almost invisible among the surrounding hills. You follow quietly. Nothing seems unusual until you notice the ground. The soil has changed from pale yellow to a deeper brown. Tiny insects gather here. The air feels slightly cooler. One weathered tamarisk tree spreads broader branches than others nearby. The guide smiles almost imperceptibly, then begins digging. Others soon join with wooden shovels and broad baskets. The work proceeds patiently rather than frantically. Layer after layer of dry earth is lifted away. Several feet below the surface, the sand becomes darker, cooler, damp. Another few careful strokes reveal something astonishing. Water. Only a little at first. A small pool gathers slowly between the grains before expanding into a shallow basin. The travelers offer quiet thanks. No cheers disturb the stillness. The discovery feels less like victory than respectful cooperation with the land. One unusual historical detail continues to fascinate archaeologists. In some ancient desert regions, experienced guides recognized hidden water, not only through vegetation, but also by observing insects, animal tracks, unusual rock formations, seasonal cloud patterns, or slight temperature differences beneath bare feet during early morning hours. Exactly how much each sign mattered remains uncertain. Many techniques were likely guarded carefully. Knowledge preserved livelihoods. Some families may have passed these observations through generations without ever writing them down. The desert kept their lessons alive. You kneel beside the fresh water. It reflects the afternoon sky with surprising clarity. Tiny ripples spread gently as a bird lands nearby to drink before quickly flying away again. The well-finder watches quietly, satisfied, not proud, merely grateful that careful attention has once again been rewarded. Soon the travelers refill their water skins. Camels drink patiently, faces brighten without excitement, only quiet relief. The journey may continue tomorrow because one person's lifelong relationship with the landscape revealed what everyone else had overlooked. As evening approaches, the desert transforms once more. Golden light softens into amber. Blue shadows stretch gracefully across the sand. The day's heat slowly releases its hold upon the earth. Far in the distance, another caravan appears, moving steadily toward this newly rediscovered well. Perhaps they too depend upon forgotten knowledge, carried inside one observant guide. You rest as the first evening breeze returns, carrying the clean scent of cooling stone across the open plain. Behind you, the small pool reflects the first emerging stars. Ahead beyond, another day's gentle journey. A quieter occupation waits among flowering fields and countless patient wings where the soft hum of bees has guided careful hands for longer than written memory can fully recall. Section 12. The quiet desert well reflects the first stars long after the travelers have settled for the evening. Its small surface catches the moonlight like polished silver, disturbed only when a gentle breeze brushes across the water. Around it, the desert cools with surprising speed. The warmth stored inside the rocks slowly escapes into the night, and the dry air becomes almost refreshing after the long afternoon beneath the sun. So you remain awake a little longer, listening. Somewhere beyond the camp, a fox calls softly across the open plain. A camel shifts comfortably before returning to stillness. Tiny insects begin their patient chorus among the sparse desert plants that somehow flourish where so little rain ever falls. Morning arrives quietly. The caravan continues its journey. You travel with them until the dry landscape gradually begins to soften. Shrubs become greener, scattered trees appear more frequently. The earth underfoot grows darker, richer, and noticeably cooler after the previous night's gentle dew. Before long, you begin hearing another familiar sound, a low, steady hum. At first, it seems almost like distant wind moving through leaves. Then the rhythm changes. Thousands of tiny wings, working together. The sound grows fuller with every step. Ahead stretches a broad meadow where wildflowers bloom in remarkable abundance. Lavender, thyme, clover, poppies, and dozens of smaller blossoms paint the landscape with soft colours that seem almost impossible after the quiet browns of the desert. The air smells extraordinary. Fresh honey, warm herbs, wheat blossoms, sun-warmed grass, a hint of damp earth lingering beneath it all. The fragrance seems to surround you completely. Waiting beside the flowering field stands another forgotten worker, whose quiet occupation shapes daily life in more ways than most people ever imagined. The Ancient Bee Whisperer. The title sounds almost magical, yet the work itself depends upon observation rather than mystery. Long before modern beekeeping equipment, long before removable wooden frames and protective veils, careful keepers learned to live alongside honeybees with remarkable patience. They understood that force achieved very little. Calm accomplished almost everything. You approach slowly. The beekeeper motions gently for silence, not because bees dislike sound, because quiet encourages careful attention. Several woven hives stand beneath the shade of broad fig trees. Some are made from tightly bound straw coated with clay. Others resemble hollow sections of carefully prepared logs resting upon simple wooden supports. Their entrances face the morning sun, welcoming warmth while avoiding the strongest afternoon heat. The arrangement feels thoughtful. Nothing appears accidental. Bees travel steadily between flowers and hives, each one carrying tiny grains of pollen upon its legs. From a distance, their movement appears random. Standing still, however, you begin noticing quiet patterns. Some return heavily laden. Others leave almost immediately. Guards pause briefly at the entrance before allowing each returning worker inside. The hive never truly sleeps. It simply changes rhythm. One well-established historical fact stretches back thousands of years. Ancient Egyptians, Greeks, Romans, and many other civilizations practiced beekeeping, valuing honey not only as a rare sweetener, but also as a preservative ceremonial offering. Medicine and ingredient in countless foods and drinks. Beeswax proved equally valuable serving candlemakers, scribes, artists, metal workers, and temple rituals. The hive offered abundance, far beyond honey alone. You watch the beekeeper preparing to inspect one of the woven hives. There is no thick protective clothing, no dramatic cloud of smoke. Instead, they carry a small clay vessel containing gently smouldering dried herbs. The fragrant smoke rises in delicate curls, drifting slowly toward the hive entrance. The bees respond calmly, not disappearing, simply becoming less restless. Historians believe that forms of gentle smoking have been used by beekeepers for thousands of years, encouraging colonies to remain settled while inspections took place. Exactly which herbs different regions preferred remains uncertain, but the dried grasses, aromatic plants, and pieces of decayed wood likely varied according to local landscapes. Every valley developed its own habits. Nature quietly shaped tradition. The beekeeper carefully removes part of the hive covering. Warm air escapes, long with an even richer fragrance. Fresh wax, honey, wildflowers, sun-warmed wood. The scent feels almost comforting, as though the meadow itself has been gently gathered inside the hive. You lean closer. Rows of honeycomb shimmer softly in the filtered sunlight. Thousands of perfectly formed hexagonal cells fit together with astonishing precision. Some contain pale golden honey. Others cradle developing young bees. Nearby workers move constantly across the wax, each following invisible routines, understood by the colony, but still fascinating to observe. The order seems effortless, yet every bee remains busy. The beekeeper smiles quietly. They always know what to do. No further explanation seemed necessary. One unusual historical detail continues to intrigue researchers. In ancient Egypt, beekeepers sometimes transported hives along the Nile by boat, allowing colonies to follow the seasonal blooming of flowers farther south or north as the different regions entered bloom. This remarkable practice gave bees access to fresh nectar for longer periods throughout the year. The river became a flowering road. The bees simply followed it. You notice that the beekeeper pays careful attention. not only to the bees themselves, but also to the surrounding plants. They kneel beside flowering thyme, examining how many blossoms have opened. They study nearby trees for signs of coming bloom. Even the weather receives constant observation. Clouds matter, rain matters, wind matters. Everything affects the bees, much like the firekeeper watched smoke or the well-finder read the desert. This occupation depends upon understanding relationships rather than isolated facts. Nothing exists alone. The meadow teaches that lesson quietly. Nearby, an apprentice gathers small pieces of clean beeswax into woven baskets. Their hands move slowly to avoid unnecessary disturbance. Later, the wax will become candles, illuminating temples, seals, protecting important documents, coatings, preserving wooden tools, and perhaps the lost wax molds used by bronze workers to create remarkable sculptures. One humble hive supports many crafts, far beyond its own meadow. Historians remain uncertain about countless everyday details of ancient beekeeping. How frequently different cultures divided thriving colonies, the exact methods used to encourage swarms into new hives, or how experienced keepers recognized illness before obvious symptoms appeared, often remains difficult to reconstruct. The bees leave few written records. Their wisdom lives mostly through observation. The afternoon grows warmer. Flowers open more fully beneath the bright sun. Butterflies drift lazily between blossoms, while bees continue their steady work without complaint. The entire meadow hums with quiet purpose, every wing beat contributing to something larger than itself. The beekeeper finally seals the hive once more. No colony has been disturbed more than necessary. Enough honey remains for the bees. Enough has been gathered for people. Balance matters, perhaps more than abundance. As evening approaches, the golden light softens across the flowering fields. Returning bees stream steadily toward their homes, while the day's final blossoms slowly begin closing their petals. The humming gradually quiets. Not because the work is finished, only because another peaceful day is ending. You leave the meadow carrying the delicate fragrance of honey and wild herbs upon your clothing. Behind you, thousands of tiny workers continue preparing for tomorrow exactly as they have done for countless generations. Ahead, beyond rivers, mountains, and growing cities, another forgotten artisan waits patiently over a small block of stone where the smallest carved line may quietly shape the fate of an entire empire. Section 13. The gentle humming of the meadow follows you long after the last hive disappears behind flowering hills. For a while, it seems to linger in your memory more than in the air itself. The soft rhythm of thousands of wings becomes almost like a heartbeat accompanying your quiet journey. As you continue onward, the sweet fragrance of honey gradually gives way to new scents carried by the changing landscape. Fresh rain upon stone, youngster, wood shavings, a trace of charcoal drifting from distant workshops. The road grows busier. Farmers guide oxen pulling heavily loaded carts toward the city gates. Potters carry stacks of freshly fired bowls wrapped carefully in straw. Traders lead donkeys laden with woven cloth, polished timber, and small chests bound with bronze fittings. Ahead rises another ancient city. Its walls are broad but welcoming. Inside, narrow streets wind between workshops where nearly every sound speaks of careful craftsmanship. Somewhere a loom clicks patiently as linen is woven. Nearby, a carpenter smooths cedar with a bronze plane. From another courtyard comes the quiet tap of a stonemason shaping marble one thoughtful strike at a time. Everywhere people are making something. You follow one particularly delicate sound. Tap. Pause. Tap. Liu silence. Tap again. The rhythm is so gentle that you almost mistake it for raindrops falling onto stone. It leads you into a modest workshop tucked away from the crowded marketplace. Unlike the noisy foundries or busy potters' yards nearby, this room feels remarkably still. Dust floats peacefully through narrow shafts of morning light. Small windows admit just enough sunshine for careful work without overwhelming the artisan's eyes. Shelves hold tiny blocks of polished stone arranged by color. Deep green jade, cream-colored ivory, smooth black serpentine, warm reddish carnelian, translucent chalcedony, each no larger than the palm of your hand. This is the workshop of the imperial seal carver. History remembers emperors pressing their seals into wax or soft clay. It remembers official decrees, royal commands, treaties, and letters carried across vast kingdoms. Far fewer people remember the quiet artisan who first carved the seal itself. Yet without those patient hands, authority remained only spoken words. You step closer. The carver sits cross-legged before a low wooden table polished smooth by decades of use. Their posture hardly changes. Their breathing remains calm and steady. Before them rests a small square of pale jade scarcely larger than a walnut. To most eyes, it appears almost featureless. The artisan sees an entire future hidden inside it. Nearby lie remarkably simple tools. Fine bronze chisels, tiny iron gravers, bow drills fitted with slender cores, swords, small abrasives made from powdered quartz and fine sand, soft brushes used to remove nearly invisible fragments of stone. Nothing looks extraordinary. The extraordinary part is the patience. The carver lifts the jade toward the window, not to admire it, to understand it. Sunlight passes gently through the polished surface, revealing faint veins hidden deep within the stone. One tiny natural fracture catches the light differently from the surrounding material. The artisan notices immediately. A slight adjustment follows. The planned design quietly changes. Rather than fighting the stone, the craftsperson chooses to work with it. The lesson feels familiar. Nature always speaks first. The finest artisans learn to listen. One well-established historical fact stretches across numerous civilizations, particularly in ancient China, Mesopotamia, Persia, and later imperial dynasties. Official seals authenticated documents, identified ownership, confirmed authority, and protected agreements. A single impression pressed into clay wax or ink often carried legal weight equal to a spoken oath. Trust rested inside tiny carvings. Remarkably small objects carried remarkably great responsibility. You watch as the artisan begins outlining the first character. The movement is almost invisible. No dramatic strike echoes through the room. Instead, the graver removes grains of stone finer than dust. Every few moments, the artisan pauses to brush away the powder with delicate strokes, revealing the slowly emerging lines beneath. Hours pass. Only a few marks appear. Nothing about the pace feels slow. It feels exact. You realize that a single careless cut could ruin weeks of preparation. Unlike painting where another layer may sometimes conceal an error, carved stone remembers every decision permanently. The seal demands certainty. Outside the city gradually awakens. Merchants begin arranging spices in neat rows of woven baskets. The warm scent of cinnamon pepper and dried ginger drifts through the open window before blending with cedar shavings and cool stone inside the workshop. A bell rings faintly somewhere beyond the rooftops. The artisan never looks up. Attention remains fixed upon the tiny surface before them. Nearby sits an apprentice studying older seals preserved inside carved wooden trays. Some bear graceful animals. Others contain elegant script so finely carved that individual strokes seem almost impossible to distinguish without careful inspection. The apprentice traces the air above one seal, not touching, only observing. Learning begins with looking. One unusual historical detail continues to fascinate historians. In several imperial traditions, particular stones carried symbolic meanings beyond their beauty. Jade, for example, was admired not merely because it was precious, but because many believed it represented purity, wisdom, endurance, and moral character. Choosing the material became almost as important as carving the design itself. The object spoke before it was ever used. Its substance carried quiet messages. You notice another remarkable habit. The artisan frequently closes their eyes, only briefly, then opens them again before continuing. At first, this seems curious. Gradually, you understand. The pause allows tired eyes to rest while the imagined design remains clear within the mind. Precision requires knowing when not to work as much as when to continue. Patience protects accuracy. The workshop itself reflects this philosophy. Nothing appears cluttered. Every tool returns to exactly the same place after use. Water sits within a small ceramic bowl to cool fingertips and settle fine dust. Soft linen cloths protect unfinished seals from accidental scratches. Even sunlight is managed carefully by adjusting woven screens throughout the day. Quiet order supports careful thought. The artisan finishes the first side of the seal and gently turns it over. Now comes another challenge. The handle. Some seals remain simple blocks. Others feature delicately carved animals resting atop the stone. A crouching lion, a turtle, a dragon, a bird poised to take flight. Each design reflects tradition, symbolism, or the rank of its future owner. The artisan selects a tiny carving knife scarcely longer than a finger. Again, the work proceeds almost silently. Only the faint scrape of metal against polished jade reaches your ears. Historians continue debating many aspects of ancient seal workshops. Did individual masters specialize in certain styles? How many apprentices typically trained under a respected carver? Were official seals produced within palace workshops, private studios, or both, depending upon time and place? The surviving seals answer only part of those questions. The conversations inside workshops disappeared centuries ago, yet the finished objects remain astonishing. Archaeologists regularly uncover seals whose carvings remain crisp after thousands of years. Tiny characters scarcely wider than grains of rice still appear sharp enough to leave perfect impressions in soft clay. The artisan who carved them is forgotten. The craftsmanship endures. Late afternoon sunlight grows warmer. Golden beams stretch farther across the workshop floor, illuminating thousands of sparkling stone particles that settled unnoticed throughout the day's labour. They resemble tiny stars scattered across dark wood. The seal is almost complete. The artisan prepares a shallow dish of soft clay. With calm hands, they press the finished carving gently into its surface. For a moment, nothing happens. Then the seal lifts away. The impression remains. Every line appears clean, every character balanced, every curve exactly where it belongs. The artisan smiles quietly, not with pride, with relief. The stone has accepted the work. Soon this small object will travel into palace archives, government offices, or royal courts. It will approve trade agreements, recognize distant officials, authorize journeys, and preserve promises whose consequences may reach across generations. Few people who receive those documents will ever wonder who carved the seal. History often remembers the signature, rarely the hand that shaped it. As evening settles gently over the city, the artisan wraps the completed seal in soft linen before placing it carefully inside a carved cedar box. Tomorrow another, small stone will wait upon the same table carrying another, invisible future within its silent surface. You step back into the cooling streets. Behind you the workshop grows quiet once more. Ahead, somewhere beyond, rugged coastlines where waves meet lonely cliffs, another forgotten guardian patiently climbs a spiral staircase each evening, preparing a solitary light that countless strangers will trust without ever knowing the keeper's name. Section 14. The tiny jade seal disappears quietly into its cedar box as you leave the workshop behind. For a moment you think about how something small enough to rest in the palm of a hand could influence decisions made across entire kingdoms. It reminds you of the honeybee carrying pollen from flower to flower, the papyrus harvester preparing blank pages for future words, and the firekeeper protecting a sanguine flame that warmed an entire settlement. History often moves this way, not through great spectacles, through quiet acts repeated faithfully. The city slowly fades behind you. Stone streets become narrow country lanes. The warm scent of cedar gives way to fresh sea air carried inland by an evening breeze. With every mile, the sound of gulls grows clearer until it joins the steady murmur of waves rolling against distant cliffs. The horizon widens. The sky feels larger. Soon you find yourself walking along a rugged coastline where pale limestone rises sharply above the restless sea. Below, waves break gently against dark rocks, polished smooth by centuries of tides. White foam gathers briefly before slipping back into the endless blue. The air tastes faintly of salt. Sea spray cools your face. Far offshore, several merchant vessels drift slowly toward land. Their broad linen sails catch the last light of the afternoon glowing softly against the water. From this distance, they seem peaceful, almost weightless. Yet you know the sea can change quickly. A calm evening may become a storm before midnight. That uncertainty shaped another forgotten occupation. High above the shoreline stands a lighthouse. Its stone tower rises with simple confidence, weathered by countless winters, sea winds and salt carried upward by crashing waves. Unlike the grand temples and palaces you have visited, this building was never meant to impress. It was meant to be seen, especially in darkness. A begin climbing the winding path toward its entrance. The stone beneath your feet has been worn smooth by generations of careful footsteps. Wild thyme grows between the cracks, releasing its gentle fragrance whenever your sandals brush against it. Seabirds nest among nearby cliffs, their quiet calls carried on the evening wind. The keeper has already begun preparing for night. History remembers magnificent structures like the Lighthouse of Alexandria, whose great beacon guided ships across the Mediterranean for centuries. Yet behind every famous lighthouse stood ordinary keepers whose patient routines mattered every single evening. Without them, stone alone could not save anyone. You step inside. The tower feels pleasantly cool. Its thick walls protect the interior from both summer heat and winter storms. A spiral staircase winds steadily upward around a central column, each step slightly hollowed, where countless feet have climbed before yours. The ascent is slow, deliberately. Small windows offer changing glimpses of the sea. With every turn, the horizon seems to expand. Fishing boats become tiny specks. The shoreline stretches farther than you realize from below. The keeper climbs ahead, carrying surprisingly ordinary supplies. Bundles of dry firewood, clay jars filled with oil, fresh wicks woven from linen, simple cleaning cloths. Nothing appears remarkable. Everything is essential. At last you reach the lantern chamber. It is open to the evening air, protected only by sturdy stone walls rising to waist height. At its center stands a broad bronze fire basket surrounded by polished metal mirrors, carefully positioned to reflect and strengthen the coming light. The keeper immediately begins working, not lighting the fire, cleaning it. Ash from the previous night is gently removed using a small iron shovel. Every remaining ember is inspected before being set aside. The bronze basin is wiped clean. Soot is carefully brushed from reflective surfaces until they shine softly beneath the fading daylight. Preparation comes first, always. You remember the sacred firekeeper from the beginning of your journey. The same quiet patience lives here. One well-established historical fact is that many ancient lighthouses relied upon open fires fueled by wood charcoal or oil. Some later structures incorporated polished metal mirrors to increase the visibility of the flame across greater distances. Maintaining that light demanded constant attention throughout the night, especially during changing weather. The beacon could not care for itself. Someone always remained awake. The keeper carefully arranges dry wood inside the bronze basket. The pieces are not stacked randomly. Smaller branches beneath, larger logs above, open spaces left between them. Air must move freely. The fire depends upon breathing, just as people do. Nearby rests a small chest containing spare tools, iron tongs, extra wicks, flintstones, a bronze knife, coils of rope, a leather water bucket. Each object has earned its place through experience rather than decoration. Outside the sea begins changing color. Afternoon blue gradually deepens into silver as the lowering sun approaches the horizon. Gentle waves catch amber reflections that shimmer briefly before dissolving into darker water. Far below, fishermen pull their boats ashore. Others continue outward, trusting that tonight's light will greet them again before dawn. One unusual historical detail survives in descriptions of several ancient lighthouse systems. During periods of poor weather, some keepers supplemented the visible beacon with bells, horns, or large bronze gongs whose sounds carried through dense fog when light alone became difficult to see. The lighthouse spoke, not only through fire, but through sound. Exactly how frequently such practices were used remains uncertain. Archaeological remains preserve impressive towers and fragments of lighting equipment, yet the ordinary routines of the keepers themselves often disappeared without written record. How often did they climb these stairs? How did they pass lonely winter nights? Did families sometimes live within the towers? Or did individual keepers work alone for weeks at a time? History answers only part of the story. The sea has quietly erased the rest. The sun finally touches the horizon. Without hesitation, the keeper strikes flint against steel. Tiny sparks leap into waiting tinder. A thread of smoke appears. Then another. Soon a gentle flame begins climbing through the carefully arranged wood before growing steadily brighter. No rush. No spectacle. Only patient fire returning once more. As darkness settles across the water, the polished bronze reflectors capture the growing light and cast it outward over the sea. The beam does not sweep dramatically as modern lighthouses do. Instead, it shines with calm constancy, becoming a fixed point upon the vast dark horizon. Ships begin adjusting their course, almost imperceptibly. The light has already done its work. You stand beside the keeper in comfortable silence. The night grows cooler. Stars emerge one by one above the quiet sea. A crescent moon rises slowly beyond distant clouds, leaving a silver path across the water that seems to reach almost to the base of the tower. The keeper rarely looks inland. Their attention belongs to the sea. Every few minutes they add another carefully chosen piece of wood. Occasionally they trim a wick. Sometimes they polish soot from the reflector while the fire continues burning. The work never truly stops. It simply changes. Hours pass gently. A merchant vessel appears far offshore, its sail little more than a pale shape beneath the stars. Though you cannot hear voices across such distance, you imagine the quiet relief aboard when sailors recognize the familiar beacon waiting exactly where it should be. They will probably never meet the keeper. They may never know the name of the person tending the fire tonight, yet they trust that unseen stranger completely. It is a remarkable kind of relationship, built entirely upon consistency. As midnight approaches, the wind freshens from the open sea. The keeper adjusts the fire once more, shielding the brightest flames from sudden gusts without allowing them to weaken. Experience guides every movement. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is hurried. You realize that this occupation shares something with every forgotten trade you have encountered so far. Its greatest success often passes unnoticed. When the light burns steadily, ships arrive safely. No one celebrates the ordinary night, only the storm remembered afterward. Before dawn eventually returns, another keeper may climb these same worn stairs carrying fresh fuel and quiet determination. The beacon will continue shining because one careful worker hands the responsibility to another without interruption. As you descend the spiral staircase beneath a sky crowded with stars, the warm glow above continues, watching over the sea long after you can no longer see the keeper themselves. A head beyond coastal villages, just beginning to stir before sunrise, another forgotten occupation patiently awaits among busy marketplaces where humble hands and simple brooms quietly prepared the streets upon which entire civilizations walked each day. Section 15. The warm glow of the lighthouse remains visible behind you long after the tower itself disappears from view. At first you catch only brief glimpses of its steady light between dark cliffs and scattered cypress trees. Then even those disappear, leaving only the quiet certainty that somewhere behind you another keeper continues tending the fire while countless strangers sleep peacefully aboard distant ships. That quiet confidence stays with you. It has become a familiar companion throughout your journey. You have walked beside people whose greatest achievements were often invisible. They kept flames alive, gathered tiny shells, ground fragrant resins, painted silent chambers, harvested papyrus, maintained flowing water, carried mountain ice, listened to bronze arranged delicate feathers, sang forgotten memories, discovered hidden wells, cared for patient bees, carved imperial seals, and watched lonely coastlines through the night. Each occupation quietly supported many others. None sought applause. The road now carries you toward another waking city. Dawn has only begun to colour the eastern sky. Gentle shades of lavender slowly brighten into pale gold while a cool morning breeze drifts through nearby orchards. Dew still clings to blades of grass, sparkling briefly before the first sunlight warms the earth. The city gates stand open. Few people have entered yet. Merchants are still preparing their stalls. Bakers have already begun kneading fresh dough inside warm kitchens, their ovens filling the streets with the comforting scent of rising bread. Somewhere nearby, a rooster announces the morning with unwavering confidence, answered by another, farther across the rooftops. The city awakens slowly, not all at once. As you pass beneath the stone archway, you notice someone already hard at work. Long before the marketplace fills, long before officials arrive, long before children begin running through the narrow lanes, a figure moves quietly with a simple broom made from bundled twigs. This is the forgotten road sweeper. History often celebrates magnificent roads built by remarkable engineers. It remembers bridges spanning rivers, triumphal arches, welcoming victorious armies, and carefully paved avenues leading toward temples and palaces. Yet every road required another kind of care. Without those who maintained them each morning, even the finest streets gradually disappeared beneath dust levers, animal waste, broken pottery, and countless small reminders of yesterday. The sweeper begins before sunrise. Always, you follow at a respectful distance. The broom whispers softly across the worn stone, producing a steady rhythm that somehow feels as calming as waves against the shore. Dust rises briefly into the cool morning air before settling inside woven baskets carried nearby. Nothing dramatic happens, only gradual change. A marketplace that looked abandoned moments ago begins appearing welcoming once again. The work seems remarkably simple, until you notice how carefully it is done. The sweeper never pushes everything toward the center of the street. Instead, debris is gathered methodically into neat rows before being lifted away. Smooth paving stones receive gentle attention around their edges, where leaves and dirt collect overnight. Rainwater channels carved beside the road are inspected one by one to ensure nothing blocks the coming day's drainage. Small attentions prevent larger problem. You have heard that lesson before. The firekeeper understood it, so did the lighthouse guardian. Nearby, another worker empties yesterday's refuse into a waiting handcart. They exchange only a quiet greeting before continuing without interruption. The city seems to breathe through routines like these. Most people never notice them. One well-established historical fact is that many ancient cities, including Rome, Athens, and numerous towns throughout the Mediterranean and Near East, employed workers responsible for maintaining public streets. Responsibilities varied according to place and period, but sweeping, removing refuse, clearing drainage channels, and preparing public spaces formed an essential part of urban life. Clean streets encouraged trade, health, movement, daily comfort. Civilization depended upon surprisingly humble tasks. The sun climbs a little higher. Golden light begins touching the upper floors of nearby buildings, while the streets below remain comfortably cool. Shopkeepers slowly unlock wooden shutters, revealing shelves of pottery, woven cloth, olive oil, dried herbs, and polished bronze lamps. One merchant pauses. He smiles toward the sweeper, not with exaggerated gratitude, with quiet familiarity. The road is ready. Business may begin. You notice something else. The sweeper carries a small wooden scraper tucked into a leather belt. Occasionally it is used to loosen dried mud pressed firmly between paving stones after recent rain. Elsewhere, a narrow brush reaches corners too small for the larger broom. Every tool has its purpose. None is elaborate. Nearby, a public fountain begins attracting early visitors carrying clay jars. Water splashes gently into polished basins, while swallows skim low across the surface before darting upward toward tiled roofs. The sweeper pauses briefly, not to rest, to remove fallen leaves collecting near the fountain's drainage channel. Soon the water flows freely once more. The action lasts only moments. Its benefit may last all day. One unusual historical detail continues to interest archaeologists. Excavations in several ancient cities have uncovered surprisingly sophisticated street drainage systems, stone curbed stepping stones, crossing busy roads, and evidence of regular maintenance. These discoveries suggest that urban cleanliness was not merely an occasional concern, but often an organized responsibility supported by daily labor. Exactly how different cities assign these duties remains uncertain. Some likely relied upon public workers. Others expected nearby residents or shopkeepers to care for surrounding streets. The evidence varies. The streets themselves remember more than the written records. You continue walking beside the sweeper through quieter neighborhoods where children are only beginning to wake. A small cat stretches lazily upon a warm doorstep before disappearing into a narrow alley. Fresh herbs hanging outside a kitchen release delicate scents of rosemary and sage as morning sunlight gently warms their leaves. The city feels alive, yet peaceful. The sweeper's pace never changes. Not hurried, not slow, simply steady. You begin realizing that this occupation involves observation as much as sweeping. A loose paving stone receives immediate attention before someone might stumble later. Broken pottery is removed before wagon wheels reach it. Fresh horse tracks suggest deliveries have already begun. The worker quietly reads the city just as the desert guide read shifting sand. Every forgotten occupation has its own language. This one speaks through footprints, wheel marks, leaves, dust. The morning marketplace gradually fills with familiar sounds. Bakers arrange golden loaves upon wooden shelves. Potters carefully unpack glazed bowls wrapped in straw. Spice merchants lift woven lids from fragrant baskets filled with cumin, coriander, fennel, and dried mint. The streets welcome them all, because someone arrived first. The sweeper finally reaches the broad square before the city's main temple. Here the work becomes even more careful. Fallen flower petals from yesterday's ceremony are gathered respectfully rather than simply discarded. A few scattered olive leaves are lifted gently from polished stone steps. Nothing sacred is rushed. Even cleaning becomes quiet reverence. Historians remain uncertain about many everyday details surrounding these workers. Did particular families hold such occupations across generations? Were they employed year-round or seasonally? Did experienced sweepers train apprentices to recognize subtle maintenance problems before they became expensive repairs? Written history rarely pauses to ask. The streets offer only silent clues. As the sun rises fully above the rooftops, the transformation becomes unmistakable. The city now feels welcoming, orderly, prepared. Citizens cross the square without giving much thought to the clean stone beneath their feet. Merchants begin trading. Children laugh while chasing one another between fountains. Visitors admire buildings instead of noticing yesterday's dust. Perhaps that is the greatest compliment the sweeper can receive. Their work disappears completely. Success leaves no trace. The broom rests briefly against a wall, while its owner enjoys a simple breakfast of bread, olives, and fresh water beneath the shade of a fig tree. There is no ceremony marking the completion of the morning's labor. Tomorrow the same streets will ask once again for patient hands. The cycle will continue, day after day, year after year, generation after generation. You leave the marketplace carrying with you a new appreciation for clean roads that quietly support every other occupation you have encountered. Without them, merchants struggle, temples gather dust, fountains clog, and daily life slowly loses its gentle rhythm. Ahead, beyond the city walls, where broad hunting fields meet quiet woodland, another forgotten artisan waits inside a leather workshop, patiently stitching tiny hoods for magnificent birds whose sharp eyes once fascinated king's nobles and skilled falconers alike. Section 16. The quiet whisper of the broom gradually disappears behind you as the city settles into another ordinary day. Merchants continue greeting familiar customers. Bakers lift fresh loaves from warm ovens. Children weave between market stalls with the boundless energy that seems to belong to every century. Before long, the familiar sounds fade into the distance until only birdsong and the gentle rustling of trees accompany your journey once more. The road bends toward open countryside. Fields of barley sway softly beneath a mild afternoon breeze. Beyond them, low forests stretch toward distant hills where sunlight filters through broad canopies of oak and elm. The air carries the pleasant scent of drying hay, fresh leather, and wild mint growing beside narrow streams that wander quietly through the landscape. You notice horses grazing peacefully in fenced meadows. Nearby, several hunting dogs rest beneath the shade of old chestnut trees, their ears occasionally lifting at distant woodland sounds before settling once again into comfortable sleep. Everything feels patient. Nothing seems hurried. Ahead, nestled between the stable and a modest falconry yard, stands another workshop history rarely pauses to admire. Its doorway is open. Warm afternoon light spills across smooth wooden floors. Inside, shelves display carefully rolled pieces of soft leather in shades of chestnut, amber, charcoal, and cream. Linen thread hangs from polished pegs. Small bronze buckles rest neatly inside carved wooden trays. Tiny bells, each no larger than a walnut, lie wrapped in cloth to protect their delicate sound. The room smells comforting. Fresh leather, beeswax, linseed oil, cedar shavings, a faint hint of lavender tucked inside storage chests to discourage insects. This is the workshop of the falcon hoodmaker. History often remembers magnificent falcons soaring through open skies beside kings and queens. It remembers dramatic hunts sweeping across wide landscapes where trained birds descended with astonishing speed upon their prey. Far fewer stories remember the quiet artisan whose careful stitching allowed those remarkable birds to remain calm before ever taking flight. You step closer. On a broad workbench rests an unfinished hood no larger than a child's fist. It appears beautifully simple. Only after looking more closely do you begin noticing the extraordinary precision hidden inside its design. The leather curves gently rather than sharply. Every stitch follows an even line. Small openings allow the bird to breathe comfortably while keeping its powerful eyes peacefully covered until the proper moment arrives. The hood is not a restraint, it is reassurance. Falcons possess astonishing eyesight. Their vision detects movement at extraordinary distances, making them wonderfully suited for hunting but also highly sensitive to constant visual stimulation. By covering the bird's eyes during travel or preparation, falconers help to reduce unnecessary excitement, allowing the bird to remain relaxed until released. The hood became an act of quiet understanding, rather than force. The hood maker sits beside the window where natural light falls evenly across the work table. Their hands move with remarkable steadiness, guided by years of experience rather than visible effort. Before cutting anything, they study a sheet of leather. They bend it gently, press it between careful fingers, feel its thickness, its softness, its flexibility. Only then does the knife appear. The blade glides silently across the leather, not wasting a single movement. Each piece follows a carefully shaped pattern, passed through generations of craftsmen. Tiny variations accommodate different species. A hood for a peregrine falcon differs subtly from one intended for a saker or a gyrfalcon. The changes seem almost invisible until someone explains them. The birds notice immediately. That is what matters. One well-established historical fact is that falconry spread across many regions of Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, becoming both a practical hunting method and a respected cultural tradition. Manuals from the medieval Islamic world and later European courts describe remarkable attention given to the care, training, feeding, and equipment of hunting birds. Every detail influenced trust. The artisan reaches for a small bone tool, polished smooth through decades of use. Rather than cutting it, gently shapes damp leather into graceful curves that will fit comfortably around the bird's head. No sharp folds remain. Everything becomes rounded, soft, natural. Nearby sits an apprentice carefully rubbing beeswax along linen thread before stitching. The wax strengthens the thread while helping it glide smoothly through the leather without fraying. Each stitch receives equal attention. None are hidden. The rhythm becomes almost hypnotic. Thread passes through leather. The needle returns. The thread tightens. A gentle pull, then another. Outside. A falconer walks slowly through the training yard with a young hawk resting quietly upon a gloved hand. The bird wears a finished hood crafted inside this very workshop. Though its eyes remain covered, it stands calmly, shifting only occasionally as warm sunlight reaches its feathers. The trust between bird and human feels surprisingly gentle. Nothing about the relationship suggests domination. Instead, it resembles quiet cooperation patiently earned over many months. One unusual historical detail continues to fascinate historians. Some master hood makers decorated ceremonial hoods with delicate embroidery, braided silk, tiny silver fittings, or colorful knots identifying particular owners or noble households. Despite such elegance, the finest hoods never sacrificed comfort for appearance. Beauty remained secondary. Fit came first. The artisan understands this instinctively. A richly decorated hood that distracts or irritates the bird has failed regardless of its appearance. The lesson feels familiar. Like the bell listener seeking true sound rather than louder sound. Like the perfume grinder balancing fragrance rather than overwhelming it. Function quietly guides beauty. The finished hood now rests upon a smooth wooden form shaped like a falcon's head. The artisan studies it from every angle. A tiny adjustment follows. One stitch shifts scarcely the width of a grain of barley. Satisfied, they nod gently. Nearby hangs an assortment of slender leather straps known as jesses. Small brass swivels rest beside them. Tiny bells wait patiently inside linen pouches. Each object belongs to a larger system. None stand alone. You notice that the workshop itself remains remarkably orderly. Leather is stored away from direct sunlight. Finished pieces rest inside cedar chests protected from dampness. Tools return immediately to their proper places after use. Even scraps receive careful attention later, becoming small practice pieces for apprentices. Waste is rare. Respect extends to every material. Historians remain uncertain about many everyday aspects of hood making. Exactly how regional styles influenced construction, whether certain family workshops specialized in particular birds, or how techniques traveled between neighboring cultures continues to invite careful study. Leather survives unevenly. Wood disappears. Thread decays. Many workshops left little trace beyond occasional illustrations and surviving examples treasured inside museums. The artisans themselves faded quietly from history, yet their craftsmanship remains astonishing. Late afternoon light begins softening toward evening. Through the workshop window, you watch a falconer remove a finished hood from the waiting bird with one smooth motion. Instantly, bright amber eyes open. The falcon pauses, surveys the landscape, then launches gracefully into the sky. Its wings beat only a few times before it begins gliding effortlessly upon rising currents of warm air. Everyone watches silently. Not the hood, the bird. The hood maker smiles, nevertheless. Their work has already succeeded. It allowed this moment to arrive calmly. The bird circles high above open fields before returning precisely to the falconer's outstretched glove. The hood is gently replaced and the falcon relaxes once more. Trust has completed another quiet circle. As evening settles across the countryside, the artisan wraps the newly finished hood inside soft linen before placing it upon a cedar shelf beside several others awaiting tomorrow's journeys. No signature is added. No maker's mark appears. The bird will be admired. The falconer may be remembered. The patient hands that shape the hood will likely remain unknown. You step back onto the peaceful road as swallows dance across the golden evening sky. Behind you, the scent of warm leather and beeswax drifts gently from the workshop, slowly blending with fresh-cut hay and cooling fields. Ahead, where villages give way to bustling crossroads and humble healing rooms, another forgotten occupation quietly awaits one balancing courage, compassion, and uncertain knowledge, while easing one of humanity's oldest and most familiar pains. Has Section 17. The scent of warm leather slowly fades behind you as the falconer's workshop disappears beyond gentle hills. For a while, you continue thinking about the quiet partnership between bird and craftsperson. A small hood stitched with remarkable care had shaped the behavior of one of nature's most extraordinary hunters, not through force but through understanding. It is a lesson you have encountered many times during your journey. The keeper of sacred fires understood the nature of flame. The well-finder understood the language of the desert. The bee-whisperer understood the rhythms of a hive. Again and again, forgotten workers succeeded because they listened more carefully than they commanded. The road now carries you toward another town. Unlike the bustling port city you visited before, or the orderly marketplace swept clean at dawn, this settlement feels modest and lived in. Small stone cottages line narrow lanes shaded by fruit trees. Smoke rises gently from cooking fires where evening meals are beginning to simmer. Children laugh while chasing one another across a grassy square. An elderly woman tends herbs growing beside her doorway. A shepherd quietly counts returning sheep as twilight settles across the fields. Nothing suggests urgency. Yet tucked away near the edge of the village stands a small building where people arrive carrying one quiet hope. Relief. This is the workplace of the ancient tooth puller. The title may sound unsettling. Modern dentistry has made many people forget just how common tooth pain once was. Before toothbrushes became widespread, before fluoride, before antibiotics, before modern fillings, a single damaged tooth could become an unbearable companion. For many ordinary people living with constant pain simply became part of daily life. The tooth puller offered one difficult solution. You step inside. The room is surprisingly calm. Sunlight filters softly through linen curtains covering narrow windows. Shelves hold neat rows of ceramic jars labeled with dried herbs, tree resins, powdered minerals, and fragrant oils. Bundles of mint sage, chamomile, willow bark and cloves hang upside down from wooden beams, filling the room with an earthy, comforting aroma. It smells more like an herbal kitchen than a place of painful procedures. The practitioner greets each visitor quietly. No one appears frightened, perhaps because everyone here understands why they have come. A middle-aged farmer sits patiently upon a sturdy wooden chair. One hand rests gently against his swollen cheek. He has likely delayed this visit for many weeks, perhaps months. Like many people throughout history, he probably hoped the pain would disappear on its own. Sometimes it did. Often it did not. The tooth puller kneels beside him. Rather than immediately reaching for tools, they begin by looking carefully. The patient's mouth is examined in the fading afternoon light. The swollen gums, the cracked molar, the neighbouring teeth, the jaw itself. Observation comes before action. You have seen this pattern throughout your journey. Nearby rests a surprisingly small collection of instruments. Iron extraction forceps, wooden wedges, fine bronze probes, clean linen cloths, a bowl of warm water. Simple tools, yet each has been shaped through generations of practical experience. One well-established historical fact is that dental treatment existed in many ancient civilizations, including Egypt, Greece, Rome, India, China, and later throughout medieval Europe and the Islamic world. Archaeological discoveries reveal evidence of tooth extraction, primitive drilling, splinting loose teeth, and attempts to relieve dental pain using herbs and natural medicines. People have always searched for relief, even when knowledge remained incomplete. The practitioner reaches for a small cloth soaked with an herbal preparation. The farmer gently bites upon it. Clove, willow bark, perhaps a little wine. Historians know that many ancient healers relied upon plants with natural pain-relieving properties. Clove in particular contains eugenol, a compound still recognized today for its numbing effects in dentistry. Nature quietly offered some comfort, even before science understood why. The room remains almost silent. Outside, birds continue singing their evening songs. Inside, everyone speaks softly. No unnecessary words disturb the careful concentration required for the task ahead. The tooth puller explains each step, not with complicated language, only calm reassurance. The patient nods. Trust matters as much as skill. The damaged tooth cannot be saved. That much is clear. The forceps are warmed slightly between the practitioner's hands before being positioned carefully around the tooth. Nothing happens immediately. There is no sudden movement, only gentle testing. The tooth puller feels how firmly the roots remain anchored within the jaw. Every tooth is different. Every extraction asks for patience. You notice something remarkable. Strength plays a smaller role than precision. The instrument rocks almost imperceptibly, a little to one side, then the other, slowly loosening what nature once secured so firmly. One unusual historical detail has fascinated archaeologists studying ancient dentistry. At the Neolithic site of Mehrgarh in what is now Pakistan, researchers discovered human teeth that had been carefully drilled approximately 9,000 years ago, using small bow drills likely adapted from bead-making techniques. Some individuals survived for years afterwards, suggesting these procedures may have relieved pain, rather than simply serving ritual purposes. The discovery reminds us that people have long sought practical solutions to suffering. Innovation often begins with compassion. The farmer closes his eyes. The practitioner waits, not because they hesitate, because timing matters. Muscles relax. Breathing steadies. Then with one smooth and practiced motion, the tooth comes free. The room grows still. The farmer exhales deeply. His shoulders lower almost at once. The pain is not entirely gone. The wound will remain tender for several days, yet one source of constant misery has finally ended. The extracted tooth rests quietly upon a folded cloth. Such a small object, capable of causing extraordinary suffering. The practitioner rinses the patient's mouth with warm herbal water before placing clean linen over the empty socket. More instructions follow. Eat soft foods. Rest. Keep the area clean. Return if swelling worsens. Simple advice. Timeless advice. Nearby, another patient waits patiently. A young woman carrying a small child. Perhaps the child has only a loose baby tooth. Perhaps she has come for herself. The practitioner welcomes them with the same calm expression. No one is hurried. Pain deserves patience. Historians remain uncertain about many aspects of everyday dental practice. Did some villages rely upon traveling specialists while others depended upon local healers? How frequently did physicians perform extractions compared with barbers, herbalists, or craftsmen whose skills gradually expanded into medical care? The written record offers only fragments. Most ordinary treatments were never considered important enough to record, yet millions of ordinary people must have experienced them. As evening deepens, candles are lit one by one around the small room. Their warm light reflects gently from polished bronze instruments now carefully washed, dried, and returned to their proper places. Nothing is left carelessly upon the work table. Preparation for tomorrow begins before today has fully ended. The tooth puller sweeps the floor, refills fresh water, sharpens one instrument that has grown slightly dull, then quietly closes the wooden shutters against the cool night air. The work is finished. For now. Somewhere a farmer will sleep more comfortably tonight than he has in many weeks. No monument will commemorate the extraction. No chronicle will preserve the practitioner's name. History rarely celebrates the quiet ending of ordinary pain. Yet for one family tonight it feels remarkably peaceful. You step back onto the moonlit village road. Above you, familiar stars slowly brighten against the deepening sky. Ahead beyond rivers, where merchants, scholars, and scribes gather inside quiet halls filled with precious knowledge. Another forgotten pair of careful hands waits patiently over fragile scrolls whose survival depends not upon famous authors but upon those who lovingly repaired what time threatened to erase. Hand section T. The quiet village slips gently behind you as night settles across the countryside. The stars above seem brighter now, freed from the glow of cooking fires and scattered windows. Their familiar patterns stretch from one horizon to the other, just as they have guided travellers, sailors, shepherds, and storytellers for thousands of years. You walk beneath them in peaceful silence. The road follows the course of a broad river. Its waters move slowly beneath the moon, reflecting silver ribbons of light that shimmer with every gentle current. Reeds sway softly along the banks while frogs begin their evening chorus among the shallows. Hours pass almost unnoticed. When dawn finally arrives, it does so quietly. Mist rises from the river. Birdsong gradually replaces the sounds of the night. Ahead beyond rows of cypress trees, an ancient city awakens beneath the first warm rays of sunlight. Unlike bustling marketplaces or royal palaces, your destination today feels unusually calm. People speak in softer voices here. Footsteps naturally become slower. Knowledge has a way of encouraging quiet. You enter a large stone building whose walls remain pleasantly cool despite the growing warmth outside. Shelves stretch from floor to ceiling. They hold hundreds of carefully rolled scrolls tied with linen ribbons. Others contain bound manuscripts resting inside wooden cases. Some are centuries old, others have only recently arrived. The faint scent inside is unlike anywhere else you have visited. Dry papyrus, aged parchment, cedar wood, beeswax, ink, a trace of lavender tucked among the shelves to discourage insects. The fragrance is gentle, almost comforting. This is a library. More specifically, this is the quiet workshop of the library scroll repairer. History remembers the philosophers who wrote great ideas. It remembers the rulers whose decrees filled official archives. It remembers poets, astronomers, physicians, and historians whose names survive through their words. Far fewer people remember those who quietly ensured those words survived at all. Without repairers, as many books would simply have disappeared. You step into a small room connected to the main library. Sunlight enters through high windows covered with thin linen, creating soft, even light perfect for delicate work. Large tables occupy the center of the room. Upon them rest scrolls in various stages of repair. Some have torn edges, others show faded ink. A few have suffered damage from dampness, insects, or countless years of careful handling. Each carries its own history. Each asks for patience. The repairer greets you with a gentle smile before returning to their work. There is no urgency here, only concentration. Before touching the damaged scroll, they wash their hands carefully in cool water and dry them upon clean linen. Every movement afterward remains deliberate. Respect begins before the repair itself. One well-established historical fact is that ancient libraries, including those of Alexandria, Pergamon, Rome, and later, monasteries and scholarly centers across Europe, the Middle East and Asia, required constant maintenance. Scrolls and manuscripts naturally deteriorated through repeated use, humidity, insects, smoke, sunlight, and simple aging. Preserving them demanded continuous, skilled labor. Knowledge could not preserve itself. Someone always stood quietly between memory and forgetting. The repairer gently unties a faded linen ribbon, securing one damaged scroll. Rather than unrolling it quickly, they allow the papyrus to relax little by little. The material has become fragile over many decades. Sudden movement could create new tears. Patience protects what strength cannot. You lean closer. The writing remains remarkably beautiful. Dark ink flows across the pale surface with elegant confidence despite its great age. Margins contain tiny notes added by generations of readers. One corrected a spelling mistake. Another clarified a difficult passage. Someone centuries ago left a small question beside a sentence that still remains unanswered. The scroll carries many conversations, not just one author's voice. Nearby small trays hold surprisingly ordinary materials. Fine brushes made from animal hair, natural starch paste, thin strips of fresh papyrus, smooth bone folders, soft lined cloths, small polished stones used to flatten repaired areas. Simple tools, extraordinary care. The repairer examines a long tear running through the outer edge of the scroll. Rather than covering it immediately, they study the direction of the papyrus fibers. Horizontal, vertical, both matter. The repair must strengthen the material without creating unnecessary stiffness. The patch should support, not dominate. You remember the seal carver changing a design to follow the natural veins of jade. Again, nature quietly guides craftsmanship. One unusual historical detail continues to fascinate historians. Ancient scribes and librarians sometimes created complete replacement copies of heavily damaged texts rather than attempting extensive repairs. In many cases, the copy itself became the version that survived into modern times after the original gradually disappeared. A book could live more than one life. Its words mattered more than the material carrying them. The repairer mixes a tiny amount of fresh starch paste inside a shallow ceramic bowl, only enough for today's work. Too much moisture could damage the fragile fibers. Too little would fail to secure the repair. Balance matters, always. Using a brush scarcely wider than a feather, they apply the paste with astonishing precision. The thin reinforcement strip settles gently across the tear. A smooth bone tool presses it into place with barely any pressure at all. No excess paste escapes. No wrinkle appears. The repaired section becomes almost invisible. Only someone looking very carefully would notice where the damage once existed. Outside the workshop, the library slowly comes to life. Scholars request scrolls from careful attendants. Students copy passages onto fresh sheets of papyrus. An elderly teacher quietly explains a philosophical argument to two attentive listeners seated beneath an open courtyard. The building hums with thought rather than noise. Everywhere people depend upon books. Almost no one thinks about who keeps them whole. The repairer continues working throughout the morning. Occasionally they pause to compare faded letters with another copy of the same text stored elsewhere in the library. One missing word, a damaged sentence, a nearly invisible punctuation mark. Tiny details matter. A single mistake copied repeatedly could quietly reshape understanding for generations. Accuracy becomes an act of responsibility. You notice another habit. The repairer frequently leaves finished work untouched for long periods. Nothing is rushed. Adhesive must dry naturally. Fresh repairs require rest. Some work simply cannot be hurried. Historians remain uncertain about many everyday practices inside ancient libraries. Exactly how repairs were prioritized, whether certain specialists focused only on scientific or religious texts, or how apprentices learned to distinguish original writing from later editions often remains difficult to reconstruct. Libraries preserved ideas remarkably well. They preserved their own routines less successfully. The irony feels gentle. The workshop itself reflects quiet discipline. Every scroll rests inside its proper, protective wrapping. Finished repairs are labeled carefully before returning to their shelves. Even damaged fragments, too small to restore, are preserved inside cloth pouches. Perhaps one day they may help reconstruct another text. Nothing is discarded without thought. Afternoon sunlight slowly shifts across the floor. Dust motes drift lazily through golden beams like tiny floating stars. The repairer finishes the final scroll of the day. With both hands, they lift it carefully and return it to its place among hundreds of others. From a distance, it becomes impossible to distinguish. It simply joins the library once more, ready for another reader, another generation, perhaps another 1,000 years. No visitor walking these aisles tomorrow will admire the nearly invisible repair hidden within its fibers. That is precisely the goal. The finest restoration leaves knowledge, not the repair itself, as the center of attention. As evening approaches, the great library grows quieter once more. Readers gently return their scrolls. Lamps are lit one by one, their warm glow reflecting softly from polished wooden shelves. The repairer cleans each brush, seals the remaining paste, folds fresh linen over the work table, and closes the workshop with the same quiet care that began the morning. Behind you remain countless voices rescued from silence. Ahead, somewhere beyond the library walls, where engineers quietly measure the passing hours with flowing water instead of turning gears, another forgotten guardian patiently watches time itself, ensuring that every drop falls with unwavering precision. Section 19. The quiet library closes its heavy wooden doors behind you. For a few lingering moments, you can almost imagine the countless scrolls resting peacefully inside their fragile fibers, protected through the patient work of hands history almost forgot. The words of poets, physicians, mathematicians, and travelers continue their silent conversation because someone cared enough to mend what time slowly unraveled. It's another reminder that preservation is often quieter than creation. The road carries you onward once more. This time it follows a broad river that winds through fertile farmland before disappearing into a thriving city beyond the hills. Water wheels turn steadily beside grain mills. Farmers guide donkeys laden with baskets of figs and grapes toward the morning market. Fishermen pull in their nets while mist still clings gently to the surface of the river. Everything seems governed by familiar rhythms. Morning, noon, evening, season after season. Yet long before mechanical clocks filled towers with ringing bells, people still needed to measure time with surprising precision. Temples opened at appointed hours, markets followed predictable routines, astronomers watched the heavens, courts announced official gatherings, religious ceremonies depended upon carefully measured intervals. Someone had to keep time, not by listening to ticking gears, but by watching water. Ahead stands a modest stone building connected to a temple courtyard. Its walls are plain, its purpose is extraordinary. Inside works the forgotten clock waterkeeper. The room feels unexpectedly peaceful. Sunlight enters through a narrow opening high above, illuminating the center of the chamber where several carefully crafted stone and bronze vessels stand upon polished wooden platforms. Water drips gently. Drop, drop, drop. The sound is almost musical, steady enough that after a few moments your breathing begins unconsciously matching its rhythm. This is a water clock, a clepsydra. One well-established historical fact is that water clocks were used for thousands of years in civilizations including ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, Greece, Rome, India, China, and Persia. Although their designs differed, they all relied upon the predictable movement of water to measure the passing of time more consistently than shadows alone, especially during cloudy weather or throughout the night. Before springs and gears, before pendulums, water quietly counted the hours. The keeper approaches the nearest vessel carrying a simple clay pitcher. Nothing about the equipment appears grand. A carved stone basin, a narrow bronze outlet, fine measurement marks carefully engraved along the inner wall, a floating indicator carved from lightweight wood. Every component serves one quiet purpose: accuracy. The keeper kneels beside the basin before sunrise. Each morning begins the same way. Yesterday's remaining water is emptied. The vessel is inspected. Mineral deposits are gently brushed away using soft reeds. Even the smallest blockage inside the outlet could change the flow ever so slightly. A single slow drip repeated over many hours becomes a noticeable error. Tiny differences become important. The lesson feels familiar. You remember the seal carver correcting a line thinner than a grain of rice. The scroll repairer smoothing invisible fibers. Again and again forgotten workers built great reliability from almost imperceptible details. The keeper pours fresh water into the basin. Not quickly, not carelessly. The surface settles. The floating marker rises quietly to its starting position. Nearby hangs a wax tablet containing the day's schedule. Temple prayers, official audiences, market opening, astronomical observations. Each depends upon the silent work happening inside this modest room. Outside the city begins awakening. Vendors arrange baskets of dates, onions, olives, and fresh bread beneath woven awnings. Potters carry stacks of newly fired vessels toward waiting customers. Children hurry beside parents preparing for another ordinary day. Most of them never enter this chamber. Few think about the water, yet nearly everyone follows its invisible guidance. One unusual historical detail continues to fascinate historians. Some ancient water clocks became remarkably sophisticated, incorporating floats connected to moving figures, bells, or mechanical displays. Engineers in Hellenistic Greece, ancient China, and the medieval Islamic world designed elaborate devices capable of announcing the hours automatically through ingenious systems of gears, pulleys, and controlled water flow. Time itself became a performance, hidden inside quiet engineering. The keeper smiles gently when a curious apprentice enters carrying another bucket of clean water. The child asks why ordinary river water cannot simply be poured directly into the clock. The answer is simple. Clean water flows more predictably. Leaves, sand, tiny insects, mineral particles, all can alter the movement. Accuracy begins long before the first drop falls. The apprentice nods thoughtfully. Learning often begins with surprisingly ordinary questions. You watch the keeper compare today's water clock with another standing beside it. Both should agree. If one differs slightly, careful adjustments follow. Nothing dramatic. Perhaps the outlet is polished. Perhaps the water level changes by only the width of a fingertip. Small correction prevent larger mistakes. Nearby an astronomer enters quietly. He records the position of the morning sun before comparing his observations with the clock's reading. Neither instrument stands alone. The heavens and the water quietly verify one another. Knowledge grows stronger through agreement. Historians remain uncertain about many daily routines surrounding ancient timekeepers. How frequently clocks required recalibration, Whether individual keepers specialized in maintaining particular designs or exactly how local climates influence measurements continues to invite careful study. Heat changes evaporation, cold changes viscosity. Even the seasons quietly influence timekeeping. The keeper understood these things long before scientific vocabulary explained them. By midday, sunlight fills the courtyard outside. Temple visitors gather beneath shaded colonnades. Officials arrive carrying sealed documents awaiting formal meetings. Musicians prepare instruments for an afternoon ceremony. Almost everyone glances toward the temple attendant announcing the hour. Almost no one wonders how that announcement became possible. The keeper remains inside, listening, watching, waiting. Occasionally another measured amount of water is added. Sometimes the outlet receives a gentle cleaning. Most of the work consists simply of careful observation. The clock speaks through consistency. Late in the afternoon, clouds briefly gather overhead. Sunlight fades. Shadow clocks become unreliable, yet inside the chamber water continues falling with quiet indifference. Drop, drop, drop. The rhythm never argues with the weather. It simply continues. You begin noticing how soothing the sound has become. Like waves beneath the lighthouse, like bees in the meadow, like the broom sweeping ancient streets, like the careful brush restoring a scroll. Every forgotten occupation possessed its own gentle music. This one is measured in droplets. As evening approaches, lamps are lit throughout the temple complex. Their warm reflections shimmer softly upon the surface of the water inside the clock. The floating marker gradually descends toward the final marks engraved within the basin. The day's measured journey nears its end. The keeper records the final reading upon a wax tablet before carefully emptying the remaining water. Tomorrow begins from the beginning again. No shortcut exists. Time must be tended daily. The vessels are washed. The outlet inspected once more. Fresh water waits inside covered jars for sunrise. The chamber grows quiet. Only a few lingering drops fall before complete stillness finally arrives. The keeper extinguishes the final oil lamp. Outside stars slowly appear above the sleeping city. People believe another ordinary day has simply passed. Few realize someone quietly measured every hour of it. You step back beneath the night sky, carrying with you a deeper appreciation for something as ordinary as passing time. Throughout your journey, you have met people whose work rarely appeared in grand histories, yet whose patience quietly supported entire civilizations. Ahead lies one final path. It leads not toward another forgotten occupation, but toward the gentle reflection waiting at the end of every long journey, where all these quiet lives, though separated by centuries and continents, become part of one shared human story. Section 20. The temple courtyard grows wonderfully quiet as you leave the waterkeeper behind. The final oil lamp has been extinguished. The last measured drop has fallen. Above you, the stars, once again, take their familiar places across the night sky, just as they have for every traveler who has ever paused to look upward after a long day's journey. You stand still for a moment, listening. There is no marketplace now, no workshop, no buzzing meadow, no lighthouse fire, only the gentle sounds of the night itself. A soft breeze moving through cypress branches, a distant owl calling from somewhere beyond the city walls. The quiet murmur of the river continuing toward the sea, unconcerned with kingdoms, empires, or centuries. It is here, in this peaceful stillness, that all the forgotten occupations you have encountered begin to gather once again in your thoughts. You remember the sacred firekeeper rising before dawn, carefully protecting a single flame that allowed an entire community to cook, gather, and survive another day. You remember the shell collector, patiently searching rocky shores for tiny creatures whose brilliant purple dye would one day color the robes of emperors. You remember the perfume grinder, whose careful hands transformed fragrant resins into offerings that filled temples with sacred scents. You remember the silent tomb painter decorating walls that few living people would ever see. You remember the papyrus harvester cutting reeds beneath the Egyptian sun, preparing the pages upon which history itself would later be written. The Roman sponge keeper quietly maintained public spaces that thousands depended upon every day. The ancient ice collector climbed frozen mountains so that cold water might refresh people far below during the heat of summer. The bell listener tuned bronze until every tone rang with remarkable harmony. The feather arranger patiently assembled delicate plumes into symbols of honor and ceremony. The morning singer gave voice to grief that families could not always express themselves. The desert well finder discovered life where others saw only endless sand. The bee whisperer understood that gentle patience often accomplishes more than force. The seal carver shaped tiny objects that quietly carried the authority of entire governments. The lighthouse keeper remained awake while strangers slept safely aboard distant ships. The road sweeper prepared each morning before anyone else arrived, leaving behind streets so clean that few noticed the effort. The falcon hood maker stitched calm into soft leather one careful thread at a time. The tooth puller eased suffering with limited knowledge but endless compassion. The scroll repairer rescued fragile words from disappearing forever. The waterkeeper measured passing hours one patient drop at a time. 19 occupation, 19 ordinary lives, 19 quiet reminders that history has always depended upon far more people than the famous names preserved inside textbooks. One well-established historical truth becomes clearer than ever. Civilizations were never built by rulers alone. Every kingdom rested upon countless skilled workers whose names disappeared while their contributions quietly endured. The roads remained open because someone maintained them. The archives survived because someone repaired them. Ships found harbour because someone tended the light. Children learned because someone preserved knowledge. Communities flourished because thousands of invisible hands worked faithfully every single day. History often celebrates extraordinary moments. Victories, coronations, battles, great discoveries, yet those remarkable events could never have happened without ordinary mornings like the ones you have witnessed throughout this journey. Someone sweeping a street, someone sharpening a tool, someone lighting a fire, someone carrying fresh water, someone quietly doing their work before sunrise while the rest of the world still slept. One unusual historical observation continues to inspire many modern historians. When archaeologists excavate ancient cities, they often recover far more evidence of ordinary daily life than of dramatic historical events. Broken cooking pots, worn sandals, sewing, needles, workshop scraps, children's toys, repaired tools, food remains, and household objects vastly outnumber royal treasures or ceremonial artifacts. The everyday survives remarkably well, perhaps because most human life has always unfolded there. Historians remain uncertain about countless personal stories that will never be fully recovered. We may never know the names of the artisan who carved a forgotten seal, the beekeeper whose careful colonies sweetened an entire valley, the lighthouse keeper who guided one frightened ship safely home during a winter storm, the scroll repairer whose invisible patch preserved a philosopher's ideas for another 1,000 years. Their names have faded. Their fingerprints have long disappeared. Even their voices have been carried away by the passing centuries. Yet something remains. Their work. Sometimes that is enough. You continue walking beneath the stars. The road feels strangely familiar now, not because you have traveled it before, because every occupation has quietly revealed the same lesson from a different direction. Great civilizations are built from small acts repeated with care. Patience matters. Craftsmanship matters. Kindness matters. Consistency matters. The smallest responsibilities often support the greatest achievements. Perhaps this has always been true, not only in ancient history, but today as well. Somewhere someone is preparing tomorrow's bread before dawn. Someone is repairing books inside a quiet library. Someone is cleaning a street before the first commuters arrive. Someone is watching over a patient through the night. Someone is keeping another kind of light burning while strangers sleep peacefully, never knowing who made their rest possible. The centuries between us grow unexpectedly small. Human beings still depend upon one another in countless unseen ways. Perhaps we always will. The moon rises higher. Silverlight washes gently across the landscape. The road eventually disappears into the darkness ahead, no longer asking you to follow it. Your journey through forgotten occupations has quietly reached its end, not because history has run out of stories. Far from it. History still holds countless quiet lives waiting to be rediscovered. Unknown gardeners, anonymous bridge builders, patient midwives, skilled basket weavers, millers, map makers, lantern lighters, stone polishers, potters, water carriers. Every generation leaves behind remarkable people whose greatest accomplishment was helping ordinary life continue peacefully for everyone else. Their stories rarely became legends. Perhaps they never needed to. As you prepare to rest, one final thought settles gently into the silence. If someone thousands of years from now were somehow to uncover traces of your own everyday life, what quiet routines might they discover? What ordinary acts of kindness? What careful habits? What unnoticed work would quietly tell your story? There is no need to answer tonight. Some questions are meant simply to accompany us into peaceful sleep. The stars continue shining overhead. The river continues flowing toward the sea. Somewhere beyond the horizon, another dawn is already beginning, and history as it always has quietly continues.